everyone. We're going to start the RTM budget hearing for Monday, April 8th. Call it to order. Will the clerk take the roll?
Ken Astorita, Peter Britton, Melissa Longo,
Here.
Brooke Sparacino, Tara Cook-Littman, Amy O'Shea,
Here.
Dave Rock, Chris Shea, Mike Hardigan,
Here.
Jeff Steele, Melissa Strauss,
Here.
Cindy Waldron, Laura Carson, Michelle McCabe, Marcy Spallier, Liz Esma, Josh Garskoff,
Here.
Kristen O'Neill, Sharon Pastilli,
Here.
Jay Wolk, Jennifer Barahona, Rob Blanchard, Nancy Donnie, Andrew Gasefa, Steve Barretts, John Delgado, John Kuhn,
Here.
Scott Nickel, Carrie Burcham,
Here.
Chris Carroll, Colin Colburn, Christine Ludwizak, Drew Georgiadis,
Here.
Lisa Havey, Mark McDermott,
Here.
Karen Wackerman,
Here.
Matt Ambrose, Justin Contrado, Margaret Horton, Pierre Ratsky.
Here.
Thank you. Let's all stand for the pledge. Thank you, everyone. We're going to start first with an introduction of the budget by our first selectman. Behind us on the screen is the presentation. Welcome, Mr. Gerber. You forget.
Thank you. Yeah. So I cut it down to just a few slides because we have a game tonight that we all want to watch. And also I've given the full presentation a couple times. Hopefully most of you had a chance to look at it. So this is sort of the skinny one, but no fluff. The priorities this year for our administration are here on the left. And we're a big focus on efficiency, putting in new programs in order to make things like purchasing, time and attendance, capital management, cash management with cash flow projections in order to make those things, to put them into place where they're not really they're fully modernized at this point, is going to take some expense and some human resources, and it's going to take up a lot of my time. So I'm going to, in a minute, talk about why it's something that I've gotten some pushback on, but I think hopefully people are coming to understand why I need a communications director, and I don't plan to do all the communications work on my own. Complete streets. We've talked a lot about that in the past. This is a big push in our budget this year. We've got projects that are on the docket and have somewhat reorganized the way that we interact between DPW and engineering. The sewer systems, talking about WPCA at some point. We have huge investments that need to happen in WPCA, and that is going to, this coming year, include a new headcount to manage WPCA as a director of that department. And it's more of a long-term thing, but we're going to be coming before you very soon with some approvals for big projects. Flood resiliency, we are going to be going out for pretty soon to get bids for a master plan for flood resiliency for the whole town, including Rooster River and other riverine sections of town and the coastline. First responder facilities. We're going to talk when the time comes about our communications center. We do not currently have an external independent person running that facility. We're going to be bringing somebody in from the outside, pulling back the police captain who is currently running the facility, and we're going to be expanding the personnel there to get the ECC to become a best practice center, and hopefully we'll be able to, once that happens, expand the number of towns we serve. I mean, the rest are things that I don't believe necessarily will cost us money, but they're major priorities. So in the short term, I just want to highlight a couple of things that have been going on that most of you probably know about. Legal representation, we have sort of transformed the way that our legal representation model from sort of a small practice advisory with a lot of legal work farmed out to firms in the area. We now have, fairly large, it's a mid-sized regional firm with over 50 lawyers. And it's really paid dividends for us so far with the ability to get excellent representation on major issues, including the United Illuminating issue with the monopoles. Finance leadership, currently our interim finance director, David Becker, is doing a great job, but we are in the process of interviewing candidates. We've had a lot of resumes come in. We are going to bring in someone with significant experience running municipal finance groups. And human resources. Human resources is undergoing a major transformation right now, putting together manuals, policy manuals. I don't know if we've ever had them, but currently it's sort of piecemeal. And there's been a lot in the papers, in the press about the lack of policies that are well understood by the employees, including recently with credit cards, but also some of the implementations of benefit policies were a little confusing. And I think we're in the process of getting that under control. We do have a strong human resources group, but they are working on not only these policies, but also taking the lead on implementation of a payroll system and as well as a time and attendance system. So they're really full out. Communications, we hired a full-time communications director. She's actually part-time, but she's working 30 hours a week. And there's been some questions about her salary, but she is not getting benefits, and she is probably one of the hardest working people in my group. I mean, we're all working extremely hard, but she's busy all day and on the weekends. Prioritization, I mentioned capital planning, cash management, cash flow. So we are implementing a capital planning system, and this is going to take, like many of our initiatives, there's a big upfront push for the employees in town hall, and as well as the requirement to bring in consultants to help with some of these things, and like payroll, time and attendance, like purchasing software and a contract management software. We are going to have to take our employees who are full out all day on their jobs and find ways that they can allocate time to actually implement a new system, and that is something that has to be done if we're ever going to improve the way we do business. And part of that will be getting outside help with consultants as well. And I think we've gotten a lot of feedback from our departments as well as residents about the issues with filing complaints through the town website. We used to have a Q alert system that worked fairly well. That was sort of broken with the new website, and we are in the process of looking at solutions to make sure that when people have issues, whether it be potholes or traffic or anything, that those complaints are routed to the appropriate department and appropriately followed up with. And we're not able to do that the way we used to, which maybe in the old days wasn't even up to the standards we'd all like it to be, but it was better than the current system. The town charter, we are going to reopen the town charter this year. There are a number of things that we have to adjust. Some of the things that we have in there now, like the limits on the thresholds for getting approval from the Board of Selectmen, those thresholds are too low. $10,000 and anything greater than 1 month is causing a significant amount of time pushing those through Board of Selectmen approval. So the Board of Finance decided that they did not think, they thought we're going to be, with all these other initiatives, that we might be too busy in town hall to do charter revision. And I did explain that that's not really something that I need to work on. It's really, I'm setting, I just need to pull together a commission, and usually it would be the commission and an external advisor, but the Board of Finance decided to cut in a 5-4 vote, cut the $100,000 that we had allocated towards charter revision for legal. I'm going to this week be putting together an appeal to restore that amount, because I really do think we need to get that done ASAP. And I think I can skip on the right side. I think most of you know that we have eliminated the CAO role, but we do have a great need for operations expertise. Would like to replace that position with an operations director. And with all of the things that we are going to be implementing, including, like I mentioned, a contract and purchasing system, payroll system, a capital management system, and many other changes to the way we do business, we're going to need people that actually know how to get that stuff done. So moving on. So what we are looking at this year in the budget are driven by a few things. One is we had, as you all know, a big increase in wages from collective bargaining agreements, mainly in the Board of Ed and firefighters this year. That is a large part of the increase in wages. And on the firefighter side, bullet point number 2, they reached agreement in mediation on 4 additional firefighters. And between that and the wage increase, that's the lion's share of the increase in the firefighter line. We've also, we are asking, or have, so far been successful through Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance to increase the number of lieutenant positions by 8, which would allow the firefighters to have 1 person in command on each of the vehicles as they go out to fires, and not be reliant on a command person showing up at the scene on time. We currently have people in the seats that should be it's their designated in command role, but they are not. So they're not being paid or treated, like the role that they're playing on those vehicles. We've added a conservation department personnel. This was a position that was cut a few years ago, so we are bringing it back to the former level. One of the main reasons is The person in charge of permitting, that we only have one. When that person's on vacation, there's no permitting that can get done. So this person will be backup for that, but also there are a large number of projects in conservation that can't get done with the number of staff that they have. We've increased the librarian, teen librarian. We've added that position. That was considered essential by the head librarian, Scott. He explained that the main library is seeing a big increase in traffic from teens, and there was not enough staff to carry out the programs that they are trying to do through a number of part-time, moving people around, number of part-time staff. And I would like to just point out, when you look at the budget, you're going to see 2 teen librarians in the main in the main library. That is just for budgeting purposes. They're grouped there, but one is Fairfield Woods Library and one is the main library. As I mentioned, the regional 911 center. So we have an increase in the police FTE for the captain who is coming back from the ECC, and we're hiring an independent expert for call centers. So if I can sum up the number of FTE increases, 4 are firefighters from the contract that's through mediation. 1 is teen librarian, 1's conservation director, 1 is the bringing back the captain, and the last is Frank. I'm blanking. Wait, 4. Oh yeah, that's 7, right? I think I got 7. Right? So we have a 7 headcount addition for the town, and I'm sure Mr. Testani will talk about the headcount addition for the Board of Ed. We were able to utilize some of the surpluses build up. We've had some very large surpluses in recent years, and so we are offsetting from the debt service fund an increase of 1.1 million in debt service for the current year. We're offsetting that by using 1.1 million from the debt service fund. We are reducing by $1 million the internal services fund, and what that is for insured medical benefits. The Board of Finance kept trying to reduce that fund by not adding to it, but it's because of experience, positive experience, and returns. The fund kept growing. And so this year, instead of just not adding to it, we are actually going to bring it down by 1 million from, I believe, over 7 million to 6 million. It's still significantly greater than I think the Board of Finance believes that it has to be. And, in the future, we have a lot of capital projects, and we plan to use surpluses to help fund capital projects in the future. So looking at our spending increase, we are below the 3-year average this year. This is post Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance review and cuts. We are currently at 3.6% budget increase, expense budget increase, which is below the 3-year average and is probably among the lower in the state that I've seen so far, at least in terms of the asks of other towns. Board of Education is up 4.8% as of now, but keep in mind that most of that, I believe, 4.5% of that is driven by the collective bargaining agreement to catch up the teachers. So we were paid significantly. Our teachers were paid significantly less than our competing towns in the area, and it was hard to hire people. Mr. Testani will talk about that. Mostly, so you can see on the right, the key drivers mostly driven by salary. And there have been FTE increases, but Mr. Testani can talk about the reasons for that. Shared expenses, the contribution to surplus that's a positive in that last year we contributed to surplus. This year we are not contributing to surplus. Surplus is well over 11% and does not need a contribution this year. So the town expenses driven by salary and the 7 FTE increase, plus an additional 1.1 million in the pension fund was required this year, and part of that is as we switched over to a new provider, they made some changes, uncovered some issues with the way it had been done in the past, and so that's sort of the net increase. When you look at non-tax revenue, we are benefiting from higher interest rates than we've seen. I mean, we saw them last year, but last year the budget for that was significantly under where it ended up. We're budgeting much tighter for this year, in line with sort of our estimates of where we think we can end up. And so we have a positive versus the prior year of 3.7 million there. The state pilot plan, payment in lieu of taxes, that's not within our control. That is what we get from the state. We are, I think, tonight or tomorrow night, going to be asking for an increase in the fees that we collect from our haulers in order to make up the increase from the waste disposal facilities. They increase their fees to us, and we would like to get that back from our haulers. Ultimately, that will likely be passed on to the consumers, and we'll do, assuming that passes, we will do a PR campaign to make sure that customers of those haulers know what they should be seeing through their bills, and make sure that it won't be that they won't be ripped off by getting a multiple of that passed through to them. We think it will be about $2 per household per month. Then I think an important thing to talk about is the fact that our real estate appraised values have gone up significantly over the past several years until this year. And when those real estate values went up, even though mill rates may have stayed relatively low, they on higher values of increased values of property, that translates into it translated into a lot of additional actual tax dollars paid. So what you can see here is that, and I have another chart on this after this, that very large increases in the past, $1 billion over the years between 2021 and 2024. This year was only a $45 million increase from last year, and that means that there's not a lot of new value on which we can rely for new tax revenue. So looking at the current year tax dollars raised, it's actually in terms of the tax dollars raised through this budget, the rate of change is significantly lower than it has been in recent years. And the mill rate increase is higher due to the fact it's 1.42% as of now. It's higher due to the fact that in the past years, the real estate values increase offset a lot of that. I do have another chart on that in a minute, so I can. It's hard to see this, but this is graph, a chart of the increase in the total budget over the last 5 years. You can see that a lot of that increase is through the Board of Ed, but the percentage increases are in line with prior years, 3.6% versus 3.4 or 3.8 the year before, 4.8 before the year before that. The COVID-19 crisis, as you all remember, we really held the budget down, and so you could look at 2022, maybe there's some rebound, catch up from that in there, but we are in line with prior years. The grand list growth, this is, I think, a really good way of looking at it. The blue is the beginning of the year property assessment. The green, or whatever that is, puce, I don't know, is the new value for which the mill rate would apply and provide new tax revenue. And it's shrunk significantly. We are going to have a revaluation again. The 10-year revaluation is coming up. We're already starting to plan for it. And fortunately or unfortunately, there will be some sort of rebalance, most likely from that. And values have apparently gone up significantly. So that doesn't mean that people will necessarily be taxed more. I mean, if it goes up a lot, you could see a reduction in the mill rate, as we have seen in the past. And I think if you get a chance, you should look online. I posted the mill rate increases and ranked them over the last 3 years. And even though our taxes were low, we were one of the highest tax increases in Connecticut over the last 3 years. That's online. It's posted on the budget site. Many of the towns, because of the 5-year reval, many of the towns in Connecticut actually had a reduction. Out of 169 towns, we were, I believe, 127th. In terms of our the size of our increase in taxes. So a lot of that was driven by COVID relief funds, ARPA, and by revaluations. So when you have a large reval, sometimes you can actually reduce your mill rate. We haven't seen that in many years, but it has happened. And so that is my brief, and probably not brief enough, review. And if anyone has any questions, we'll be talking about each individual component of the budget, but feel free to also email me through the moderator. Thanks.
Thank you, First Selectman Gerber. Does anyone have any, just before you go, just any general questions? Again, we're going to be going through each budget item, but I just want to make sure no one has any specific general questions. And if you're online, representatives, you can put a question in the chat that you have a question. Okay, we'll go on to, we'll let the Board of Ed come on up. The Board of Education is coming on up, or not the Board of Ed, but representatives. And we'll just have you guys each introduce yourselves, and then they're going to give us a presentation on the Board of Ed budget.
Good evening, everyone. Jennifer Jacobson, Board of Ed Chair.
Good evening, everyone. Courtney Laborious, Chief Financial Officer, Board of Ed.
Hi, good evening. Michael Testani, Superintendent of Schools. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present the 24-25 budget here tonight. I also want to just acknowledge before we start the hard work and the due diligence done by the boards before this, the Board of Education, the Board of Selectmen, and the Board of Finance. They did a great job in vetting this before it came to you, before you tonight. So just want to start with that. Just not going to bore you with some of the slides here. You all Just want to go to the executive summary. I just want to stress that this budget reflects a continued commitment to excellence in education while responsibly addressing the financial realities that face our district. The Board of Ed budget, which was passed, totaled $221,500,484, which was a 5.39 increase over the previous year's budget. And the Board of Selectmen did reduce the budget by a little over $1.2 million to reflect the lower renewal rate for the board's state health insurance plan, which brings us to tonight for a total budget of $220,221,484, which is a 4.79% increase from last year's ask. I want to stress that this is probably, if you've done any reading of the newspaper in the recent months, this is probably one of the lowest asks in the area. So we are proud to present a budget that is not only meeting the needs of the children here in the Fairfield Public Schools, but also fiscally responsible. The budget is built on the framework of being structurally balanced, very strategic. We look at the return on our investments, and we try to limit increases and look for offsets as much as possible to pay for those increases. There are some hurdles that we are all facing. Obviously, we're all aware of the inflationary impact on all our budgets, whether it's your home or here in the municipality in the town of Fairfield, and it's no different for the Board of Education. We have contractual obligations. We are bound to fulfill those contractual increase in costs. It was mentioned by the first selectman, and we'll talk a little bit in a minute about the teacher's contract, which was recently settled, and happy to report that we came to an agreement that brings us to a competitive wage for all our teachers here in the Fairfield County area. Another major hurdle are unfunded mandates that come down from the state of Connecticut. There are several of those that have come down this year, some of which were enacted after last year's budget that impacted special education, which also has impacted the increase to this year's budget to the tune of $622,000+. We also have continuation of the new reading legislation that was enacted last year that we are in the process of rolling out in the fall for the new school year, which also had some budgetary impacts that are still carried into this year's budget. We had some class size and enrollment at some of our elementary, middle, and high schools that we had to account for additional staffing to meet the needs of those children. And as everyone is aware, September 30th, we have to encumber all our BESSER funding, which is coming to an end. I would happily be proud to say that Fairfield Board of Education did an excellent job in not creating a fiscal cliff by using the funds not only wisely, but also responsibly. And as you can imagine, many of our neighboring towns are facing many challenges and hardships for not taking the same approach. When we talk about fiscal responsibility, what does that really mean? Well, we leverage a lot of in-district programming to better serve our students. A lot of that is around the area of special education, which you've heard in the past. Not only serves our children well right here in the Fairfield district and saves us from having to send them out on long bus rides, often away from their peers, but also brings a return on investment because those programs here in district are much more cost-effective than paying outside providers. We've identified multi-year opportunities in the purchase of technology and upgrading our facilities and equipment upgrade cycles. And zero-based budgeting identifies opportunities to leverage existing resources across all our schools. Major budget drivers. So as was mentioned, the teacher's contract, Fairfield was one of the lowest paying school districts of their teachers in the area. I did a study a couple of years ago as I was trying to advocate at the state level for increased teacher pay in my previous district. And unfortunately, Fairfield was one that was at the bottom, right along, just slightly above where Bridgeport was. So I think we did a great job in closing the gap with some of our competing districts that were taking many of our highly qualified teachers simply because they needed to earn a better living wage so they can keep up with the inflationary costs across our state. We also had non-certified contracts that are, many of that was discussed last year when we right-sized our pay for our para-educators who play a crucial role in our schools, especially with our most vulnerable students. We had some enrollment adjustments that increased FTE in our elementary, middle, and high schools. We had an increase, as you can see, of over 1% to benefits. We had the adjustment because we did receive good news this year that the state partnership plan was coming in at a lower rate than originally we were told to budget for. And we have some slight increases in transportation to the contract that are obviously for the increased cost of transportation and fuel. And we had some savings in utilities this year that we're proud to present and is reflective in this budget. Again, we had some of the some of the instructional priorities that we were able to include in this budget. I will talk a little bit about those in future slides. Again, due to legislation, we have about $500,000 to continue paying for resources for the new right to read legislation, which will be rolled out in the fall. We've done a little upgrade to our security personnel at our 3 high schools in this budget. We've increased a small percentage for leadership training for our administrators across the district. A slight increase in equipment and supplies. Again, through our technology equipment replacement, we have some offset of almost $500,000. We've seen a small reduction in tuition to our VOAG and VOTEC programs. And altogether, we did look for some offsets with that security upgrade of personnel at our high schools. We did find some savings in the contractual services, so that's reflective in here as well. So as you can see, that leaves us a total of a little over $10 million or 4.79% year over year. Again, this just illustrates some of the highlights and the major drivers of what's increasing the budget. As I can say that the 4 million, about a little almost 2% of the ask, of the overall ask, is related to the teacher's contract, and the almost 0.75% to the paraeducator contracts. We have a slight increase to special education. Again, that was due to the change in legislation. Prior to last summer, children were expected to stay in district through their 21st birthday. Now the legislation requires us to keep them through the rest of the school year of the year they turn 22. So again, that increased our budget a little over $600,000 this year, and that is expected to carry over into next year. So children now have the ability to stay with us a little bit longer, which I think was a great move, but unfortunately, state of Connecticut did not bring any additional dollars with that mandate. Go figure. Just to talk a little bit about the teacher's contract, the little over $4 million provides about a little over 4.5% on average for an increase in compensation for all our FEA staff, which again brings us to a more competitive wage. But unfortunately, like I talked a little bit about last year, for those of you that were here, we anticipated a decent increase because they were well underpaid compared to our competitors. However, in the next 3 years during this contract, we will see those increases in our competitors. So I'm sure we'll be having the same conversation in 3 years if we're going to be able to keep up with the ever-changing and demanding market for highly qualified educators. If you're not aware, it's a very, very difficult time to find teachers across the country. We have a teacher shortage. We also have a major teacher preparation program shortage of folks entering into the profession. So it's very, very, very critical that we're able to hold on to our highly trained, highly skilled staff that we have for our Fairfield children. I can stop for a minute if anyone wants to ask any questions, or I can continue.
Now would be a good time for questions. Are there any representatives with questions so far online? Just put it into the chat that you have a question. Representative Pistilli. online.
Hi, Sharon Pistilli, District 5. Can you guys hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. Thank you for being here, Mr. Testani. I do have a few questions, and I'm sorry I'm not in the room, but I was wondering if you could explain the revenues that are on PDF page 147, which is like paper page number 130. At the top of the page, there are revenues, and the revenues seem to be decreasing over time.
Yes, we've lost excess cost, which is the reimbursement for our special education expenses for out-of-district placements. The General Assembly put aside a little over $181 million to cover all excess cost reimbursement across the state. Because of where we fall as a district, we lost, if we were fully funded, we would have been about another 1.2 million. From last year to this year, the percentage that we were reimbursed went down as well. So we did lose some funding there in revenue. So that accounts for a lot of that. We also had some changes that's difficult to predict based on our ECC, our early childhood folks. That's all based on income. So we really can't predict if those are going to be families that qualify for free and reduced lunch. So that also has an impact on our revenue that comes in. And of course, as mentioned earlier, the loss of the Art Besser money also has had a slight impact on our revenue as well.
Great. I'm sorry, the loss of what? I apologize. I couldn't
The
hear.
Art Besser federal funding, that is.
Oh, I got it. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And then I just had a couple of more questions, Madam Moderator, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead, Representative Pistilli.
Okay, great. I was wondering if you could, and I know this is something we don't want to discuss in detail, but I know that there was a request for the increase in the security budget.
Yes, so we are adding an additional security guard at Fairfield Ward High School and Fairfield Ludlow High School. This is something we've had some conversations with the administration in both buildings. They felt that having an extra set of eyes across the building, large buildings, would be helpful. And then we are transferring contracted services at Walter Fitzgerald to an in-house security officer to maintain consistency of the individual there. It's quite critical that that person is able to build strong relationships with the children and the staff at Walter Fitz. And the contracted services, it's been inconsistent. There's been different folks throughout the year, and it really hasn't panned out the way we had hoped.
Okay, great. And then, Madam Moderator, if it's okay, I have two more questions.
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Could you explain the need for the additional sixth grade teachers where in some instances, like when my kids were at Woods, like they both were in a team environment, and how I think in some instances the team environment was eliminated and now we're trying to restore it?
Yep, that was going to be the first slide as we resume the presentation. So if you could hold tight for a couple of minutes, we'll get right back to that.
Okay, great. And then the other thing is that my understanding is that there were additional headcount that were added in the 23-24 budget. And is this additional headcount going to continue in the 24-25 budget? And were the additional headcount approved by the Board of Ed, or what's been the process for approving additional headcount mid-year, like not during the budget cycle?
Well, some of that headcount was to increase special education classes that we opened up. Those are all in this year's budget, and we do not anticipate any additional headcount necessarily moving forward unless we see a need to meet the needs of our students. So I can't speak to what we could uncover or what we're facing currently for next year, but there is no plan or there is no need to increase headcount during the 24-25 school year unless we have an increase in enrollment that causes us to go over in any of our elementary sections, which would cause us to have to open up another classroom because it exceeds class size here in the Board of Ed's guidelines.
And what's the proper policy if that happens? Like if we do go over section limits, is the proper policy to go back to the Board of Ed to request additional headcount? Is that how it works, or can you explain how that works to add additional headcount?
No, that, if we go over, then there, and we're actually working on policy now, but that's then at my discretion as superintendent, whether to open up another section. So for example, if we go over in fourth grade at Holland Hill School, prior to the start of the school year, we would open up another section of fourth grade. If we also go below, we could also collapse sections as well. So that's also happened in the past. Unfortunately, this year, we didn't see the opportunity. We didn't lose anyone of any significance to cause a collapse at any of our elementary schools. Right now, we don't know. It's a little early to tell, but there may be some possibilities based on registration as we get further into the summer.
Okay, and then my question is for where the headcounts did increase. So basically we've had an increase from 23-24 to 24-25, and some of those headcount increases were not approved by the Board of Ed. So can you explain that policy and how that happened?
Yes, so again, we opened up a CLC classroom at Jennings School, which is a teacher, paraprofessionals are involved, as well as ed trainers. We added a individual to meet the needs at Walter Fitzgerald, a restorative practice interventionist, which has helped as we've seen an enrollment increase at Walter Fitz as well. Historically, we've been on the rise with enrollment at the campus. From in the past, I was told there would be about 20 to 25 students. This year, we have upwards of almost 60 students. So the need to add an additional staff member, I felt, was important to maintain the positive school climate there.
Okay, so if there is additional,
there has been a shift of staff, for example, speech language pathologists, school psychologists that were on the contracted side, and now has shifted over because we've been able to hire away from the contracted side onto our FTE side. So they were not there prior because we couldn't find them. We've been doing a really good job in our recruitment strategies and have been able to hire staff that the prior year we were unable to hire.
got it. Well, and it seems like the higher wages are going to help with the attraction and retention issue. But I'm just, so if we do add staff in 24-25, any of that additional headcount will go through the Board of Ed for approval then, right?
Sure.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you, Mr. Testani.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Hardigan.
Am I audible?
Yep, go on.
Mike Hardigan, District 3. I have a general comment and then a question for Mr. Testani. So I see that we've got one of the lowest increases, requested increases in Board of Education budget in the region. And the vast majority of that is being dedicated to things with fairly fixed costs. You're talking about the salaries, negotiated contracts. And then there's a lot of discussion of an awful lot of challenges we're going to be facing, changes in state legislation, bus driver shortage, and on and on. So I very much appreciate all the work that went into being fiscally responsible. But my question is, do you feel that this is going to be enough to continue to provide quality service in Fairfield. You know, a lot of people move to Fairfield and live in Fairfield for a high quality education system. And are we doing enough to respond to the changes that other towns might be responding to?
Yes, well, I do believe that we are providing and will continue to provide the highest quality education in the state of Connecticut. There are some liabilities in this budget, and those are not for a shortage of services, but we have seen an uptick in the money that we're spending on substitute services this year. I mean, it's just something we're trying to rein in as the year has gone on, but we've seen more long-term absences. Many of those are due to illness, unfortunately, and we can't do anything about that, and we wish our staff well. We have had a number of, highest in a long time, of people on maternity and paternity leave. So we congratulate our staff. I'm sure as a result, those were decisions that may have been put off because of the pandemic. So we're hoping that doesn't continue for next year. So there are some liabilities there. And of course, with special education, where there's always the chance that those costs could increase, that the excess cost could go down again, given the number of needs across the state and the fixed number that the General Assembly sets aside. So we're going to watch things very closely as the year unfolds next year. But I am confident with the budget that we have presented before you tonight that we are not wavering or settling or compromising on any programs or services for children. That would be irresponsible of me as superintendent of schools.
Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Waldron.
Cindy Waldron, District 3. Hi, thank you for everything. If you could you please elaborate a little bit more on the restorative practices person you have hired in, I think it's Walter Fitzgerald,
yes.
correct? And what specific qualifications has this person brought to enable and facilitate matters at, you know, that very unique school?
So outside of the extensive training he's received, the individual in restorative practices through our collaboration with RIASAP, he comes with a wealth of experience, I believe almost 30 years, working at CES and Boys and Girls Village. So he's worked with some children that have experienced a high level of trauma and have profound needs. So he's been a great addition to the campus since last year, toward the end of last year. We've heard some really great stories and feedback from the children that attend Walter Fitz on the impact that they've had on his life in on their lives in such a short period of time. So it's been a huge addition to the campus. Many of our staff members there were advocating when I was hired the return of a dean of students, which the campus had for many years. And we just didn't feel, and my philosophy isn't to bring in somebody that's going to be another barrier to their success, but someone that can be encouraging, supportive, but also work through some of the challenges some of the children bring to school. It is an alternative setting, and you need to have a certain skill set to be able to work with children that have needs.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Colburn.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and thank you all for being here. Colin Colburn, District 8. I apologize if this answer is in here, just haven't found it yet. Can you speak to enrollment projections for 24-25?
Sure.
Page 143.
The million-dollar question. So as we see a slight dip in enrollment, the issue is where the enrollment is dipping. Unfortunately, it's not at our elementary schools or our middle schools necessarily. Some of it's at our high schools. And in order, because we've had this discussion internally. In order to see any type of decrease in FTE at the high schools, you need to see a really high number of students exit because they are spread across so many 4 years of 4 grade levels and so many class offerings. So when you see, for example, a dip of maybe 100 kids at all concentrated in one high school, you really don't get the rewards. We sat recently with both high school administrative teams and support teams to go over their course selections for next year. We're going to revisit that again in a couple of weeks after they've built their schedules. But it's really tight. We don't want to, as one of the other RTM members mentioned in their commentary, we don't want to sacrifice any of our programs to try to nickel and dime by saving maybe possibly a half a teacher at one of our high schools. But we are seeing an increase at our elementary schools as we did this past year. We've been watching very carefully our kindergarten enrollment and our preschool enrollment. I'm happy to say that we've gone by adding, and it's going to be part of the next part of the presentation, 3 preschool classes, which already have been fully enrolled through registrations for next year. So we're going to see an uptick in those areas, which could have an impact on the increase of possible FTE.
Thank you. Representative Havey.
Thank you, Representative Havey, District 6, through you, Madam Moderator, to Superintendent Testani. Actually, my question ties in great with Sharon's, and I'm drawing a blank, I'm sorry. I was going to ask what the current FTE was, but asked and answered. But I'm curious as to why additional FTE is requested, given that we do have declining enrollment. I did hear what you just said, and I didn't feel that that was an answer to that question.
So again, it's not just the number, it's where the number is decreasing. And the number is not decreasing in a grade level that is having an impact on the need for staffing. So again, at a high school, if you lose 50 kids at Fairfield Ward High School, because those 50 kids are all taking different classes, you may see a decrease in a math class of 2 kids, another math class of 1. But that could be a geometry and algebra. So there's really no gain there. In order to see a significant increase in FTE, you would have to see that at a specific grade level at a specific school, like Holland Hill would have to lose 7 first graders, and that could possibly result in the reduction of 1 first grade class. But because they're spread out over so many schools and so many grade levels and so many classrooms, you don't get any bang for your buck there in a reduction.
In the budget book, it showed a bunch of FTE changes not related to actual teachers. So I'm wondering still why you would want 15 more FTEs.
So when you open like a CLC classroom, for example, the model is 1 teacher, an ed trainer, and 7 paraprofessionals, because for the 10 children that require a high level of care. There are other opportunities where children do require through their IEPs legally a 1-to-1 para, so that would add an FTE as well. So there's various reasons why you would add staff, but nothing is just to add staff to add staff. There's always a purposeful reason for why that staff would be added to serve a child.
Are you speaking in actuals or theoreticals?
Both. So we have seen with some of our CLCs, we did actually add a classroom. So that was 9 staff members for that 1 class. We have seen other shifts where through the IEP PPT process, children now require a 1-to-1 paraprofessional because of the needs within the classroom, especially when we try to get these children into the gen ed as much as possible through our least restrictive environment requirements, legally through IDEA. And many times those children, in order to integrate with their typical peers in a full classroom, to be able to achieve at a higher level with their peers, they require a 1-to-1 pair.
Ms. Jacobson, did you have any other comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly follow up on Mr. Testani's answer about the enrollment chart. Also remember that these are October 1 counts, and we pick up students throughout the entire year that aren't captured here. So for example, this year, we are higher than what you would see in the budget book. At the elementary level, I believe it's about 78 students higher today than what we started with. So remember, when the state takes account, it's October 1, and then you continue. They did right-size the preschool enrollment, hopefully, for next year, given the additional 3 ECC classrooms, so that you see that note at the bottom that the pre-K enrollment is growing substantially, but also been tracking this very closely on a monthly basis. And at the elementary level, we are higher than what has been projected. So that also accounts for those additional sections at a couple schools that we needed to add. And then when you add more students into a building, then they need that little bit more for art, and then the rotations that they go through, music, whatever it may be. So that's the partial head counts that you see there on the specials. And then the rest is a lot of the mental health supports, the restorative justice, the guidance counselors, the social workers. The CLC was a significant portion of that headcount this year. So it's really about not only just the classroom, but the support and wraparound services that students are receiving in and outside of the classroom as well. And
And I just also wanted to piggyback one more important point that was brought up by an RTA member earlier. It is a time when you're seeing a small increase to the budget relative to our peers, and given the climate that our students are living in. And Mr. Testani has brought about pretty significant efficient change, I would suggest, to this budget. So when you look at the head counts, some of the things that you're seeing, for example, when you look at the head count add of 2 CLC classrooms this year, those are, cost avoidance classrooms. So you see the relative stasis of, for example, the special education budget, because you've invested in those in-house services. That's just one example of the many pieces of this budget. An additional one is just being very responsible about the paraeducator staffing. So although it looks in this budget like an increase of 6 FTE, it's actually not an increase in cost year over year, because that was a shift from a grant, and it's looking at where we can best utilize our resources. So for example, if we were using a contract, but instead we can do it in-house and do it better and keep kids in district, that's been a big focus. So there are a lot of pieces of the budget that, for example, on the headcount side would appear like it's a big headcount, but it's not a big dollar ask because of some of those. I know we've been reluctant to say structural changes, but I would argue that there have been some structural changes and efficiencies built into this budget planning process that enabled us to do things, I think, better and more efficiently.
Thank you. However, I didn't count 6, I counted 15 FTE. So 6 was what?
6, well, we had 7 paras, an ed trainer, which is a non-certified staff, and a teacher just for the 1 CLC classroom. So that there, though, as we talked a little bit with the Board of Finance, is has a return on investment, because if we had sent those 10 children out of district with transportation, that would have been upwards of $1.5 million.
Yeah, I've been doing this a long time, so yeah, I can appreciate keeping them in district.
I mean, I understand when people look at the budget, especially the special education side, they look at numbers. Unfortunately, I look at children, and these are children that have various needs, some of them profound, and they deserve the same opportunity that their peers have to stay in their local public school. Some people share a different philosophy and would rather ship them out, and I'd rather keep them here.
I don't know that 6 would have raised my concerns, but 15 added to the 20-something that was added last year added to the, I can't remember, 12 or 15 that were budgeted for. It just seems a lot of increases to FTE.
We have a lot of needs in the district. Again, as the gentleman mentioned, we want to keep up and make sure that we're providing high-quality services to our students, and that takes bodies. We did shift people again from the contracted services onto the full-time FTE line, which again provides consistent services to children and not worry about who's coming in our buildings throughout the year. And we had a lot of complaints with that last year with the contracted services, specifically at 2 of our elementary schools that had a revolving door of school psychologists.
Representative Harvey, on page 158, were there any specific?
Pardon me,
Sorry.
that's Havy.
Oh, sorry, Havy, sorry.
H-A-V-E-Y.
Sorry. On page 158 is all of the head count. If you have any questions on any of those particular positions, happy to answer why they were added. I mean, most of them, there are a few at elementary, middle, and high school, but a lot of them, as I've stated, are more in the support care category and special education category. And that's all driven by, I mean, even if we had 1,000 less students in the budget, but the remaining required more services, you would still see, do you know what I'm trying to say, in terms of what you have to provide in terms of meeting those students' needs. So there isn't a lot. There's only 2 at the elementary level, 4 at the middle school level, which are those 6th grade teachers at Woods and RLMS. And then at the high school, you've got a net of 0.5.
Thank you very much. I'll take a deeper dive and get any further questions sent through the moderator. Thank you very much for your time. And I do appreciate the difficulties of the budget. I've been, like I said, doing this a long time.
Thank you, Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mark McDermott, District 9. I just want to comment that I think you've put together and approved a responsible budget here. I understand what you're fully saying. My mother was a special ed teacher, so I know what it takes to run a classroom and how many people it may need depending on what's in the classroom, what kind of students in the classroom. My question is, since we're talking about headcount, what are we looking at for retirements this year? If you have that number or approximate, I know it's a little early yet, but.
Yeah, so I believe we budgeted 14 on the certified side, and we've seen 7 as of Friday, because I check in every week with our HR department. But they had 3 that had notified us on the horizon, so we do expect that we'd hit that target number that we were looking at for this budget.
Thank you. And, you know, it's, as you said, there's a tremendous shortage of teachers in the whole country right now. I mean, my brother just retired actually as a 5th grade math teacher this past year after, I don't know, 38 years of educating. And, you know, we lose a lot of know-how and talent when people like that leave. Obviously, we bring in a little lower paid people. They're probably happy to retire because that brings the payroll down for you people that don't like to see all this money going out. Yeah, I think, you know, we got to hold on to our teachers as much as we can and not say, oh, we should get rid of some teachers because these classes declining enrollment. But it's, you got to see where that enrollment is how you described it. It's in the elementary schools, high schools. The substitute teaching is a major issue. My daughter goes to school sometimes. She's in 11th grade at Fairfield Ludlow. There's a sign on the door, no class today, no substitute. So that's an issue. So they're not getting educated on that day. Right. So there are major problems here, and I'm glad you've addressed most of them. I know you can't do much about the substitute issue. It's difficult. I know when I first came out of college, I was looking for a job, and I was substitute teaching at my high school for a short time. So don't want to do that again. But
well, we do a really good job. Our staff here, Lisa in HR, does a tremendous job. Our fill rate is over 75% on most days, sometimes over 80%, but there are those opportunities that we just can't fill. But it's getting tougher. And I just want to say that I know this is hard to hear, but this hasn't been a problem in Fairfield, but it's starting to creep into all the suburban towns. The rural and the urbans have been facing some of these challenges for many years. But now it's affecting everyone. The teacher shortage is real. Our support staff shortage is even getting worse. So speech language pathologists, school psychologists, special education teachers are just not in the pipeline. So this is going to be a challenge we're going to face until there is a corrective action. We're working with the state. But right now, this is just what we're going to be facing for the next several years.
thank you.
Thank you, Representative Horton.
Hi, Margaret Horton, District 10, through you, Madam Moderator. I wanted to just go back to headcount for a second in terms of the mental health support services with psychologists and social workers. A couple questions. One, what kind of metrics do you use to determine sort of how many FTEs are needed at each school? I'm assuming it's student population.
Yes, student population, IEP hours. So for school psychs and social workers, how many students have how many hours in their IEP, and where it's, what schools they're located at. But the state recently added to their dashboard on Ed's site what the state average is, and you can go through every district when it comes to support staff, school psychs, school counselors, nurses. So we've been going through that. In some cases, we're on par with the state average, and in some cases, we're starting to fall behind as well. So really going to take a closer look at that for the future to see how we can better meet the needs, especially the mental health needs of children that we know is becoming a crisis across the country.
Yeah, I was wondering, I noticed a couple little things. One, I was curious why there wasn't a social worker at Roger Ludlow Middle. There is guidance counselors and psychologists, but it doesn't have a social worker listed. And then the other piece I was wondering about, I noticed there's no ask for an increase in staffing in those areas across the middle schools and high schools for next year. And just knowing the mental health crisis that ages 12 to 18 in particular are really facing, I want to make sure that we are able to provide adequate support to those students.
Yeah, right now we seem to be doing a pretty good job. We have been monitoring the number of visits to the school counselor, to the psychologist, the social workers across the district. But again, that added link on Ed's site from the state recently came out. So taking a closer look at that, that was something that came after the budget was already approved and moved on. But we are gathering feedback through our climate surveys as well with students and families and staff to see if we need to make any adjustments to that going forward.
And how come no social worker at Ludlow Middle?
No, I think I'll have to take a look. That may be an error because there is social work support in all our buildings. So I'll have to double check and I can get back to you. That could just be an error in the book.
That'd be great. It was on page 20 and I noticed that there was none.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions before they go on? Oh, Representative Steele.
Thank you. Jeff Steele, District 3. I just want to follow up on the last question. And I think a couple of things were answered because I ask this every year. What is central administration doing this year and going forward versus last year in the world of mental health awareness and training, and not just for teachers? And there's QPR training that I was told 2 years ago was going to be put in place for every single teacher and aid worker in the high school. I don't know if that's happened. I'd love to know. And then in terms of awareness among students, I don't know if anything's been added to the curriculum. I realize the elementary and middle school years it's difficult, but certainly at the high school level, I would think more mental health awareness classes and just that awareness would come into play, especially since there's been 2 suicides here at Ward in the last few years, let alone attempts. And I just, what has changed from last year besides I see there's some increases in social services, guidance, psychological services, but what changes are in place and has QPR training been put in place?
I could find out on who's been trained. I can't speak to that. We are doing a lot of training and working through slowly. We started with our administrative staff over the summer in the restorative practices. There's been a lot done through the health curriculum at the elementary schools and the middle schools, as well as the high schools, around some of the more current challenges. We've been trying to send out resources to parents around things like social media content and how to have conversations with their parents. We're working with a group of parents now that are looking at how they can curb access to smartphones until later on in their child's development. We have a partnership with Fairfield Cares and other outside providers. All the schools are working closely with different organizations to bring in folks to try to provide additional support. The list goes on and on. I mean, this is just becoming a target that we're trying to play catch up with, it seems, year after year. And a lot of it is trying to give parents the tools to help be partners in this work, because the amount of screen time that children are facing at home A lot of parents, and I had this conversation with my chair here, Jen. You know, we're trying to give them the tools to try to prevent some of the things that kids are getting into, especially when it comes to after hours. A lot of parents do not take devices and things like that prior to bedtime. We're trying to encourage them to do more of that because kids are staying up all night, conversing online. So really trying to raise awareness across the districts to engage parents in this work is a critical component, and I think we're making some headway. We have a lot of parents that recently signed this petition that they would pledge to get on board. I think over 600 so far and counting. So I think the word is starting to spread, but it's something that we're constantly trying to catch.
I think that's great. So, but even beyond that, and I think that's fantastic that you're doing it at the parent level, but even among students,
Yep,
among kids.
we've invested in a platform. It's a social emotional platform. This is year 1 of 2 years, and then we'll reassess, called Move This World. So kids are engaged in videos with actors that are at their appropriate grade level, engaged with teachers and having discussions around those topics. We have an SEL committee that went through and vetted and selected videos that were age appropriate, and we're tackling the issues that many of our children in district are facing. And that leads then to broader and more specific than conversations with kids that exhibit any emotional crisis as a result.
That's great. Last thing I'm going to say is, having had 3 kids go through the school system here, bringing in outside speakers who've gone through crises themselves is one of the most powerful tools that you could provide to kids when they're in a collective auditorium or in a small classroom. To be able to share these experiences can be as powerful as anything. So hopefully that continues.
Agreed, because I think hearing the same message from us all the time, we get tuned out after a while. To bring in others that can tell their story is always extremely powerful and impactful.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative McCabe.
Michelle McCabe, District 4, through you, Madam Moderator. I want to say thank you to all of you for all the work that you do to support our children. And in particular, I do want to say how much I appreciate a lot of perspective that you've brought to the district, in particular with restorative practices, which are really important. And I know that those are relatively new. I know that we are living in really challenging times, and school is just one place of many arenas where there are a lot of really challenging, I don't even want to say conversations, because unfortunately they're not often conversations, and we need more attention to not just mental health. And I appreciate Representative Steele and all that he said and agree with all of it because it's so important, but also just how to have difficult conversations with each other and how to have them without it being a punitive experience, but a growing experience. And I know that we put a lot of responsibility and pressure on schools because in part it's such a great opportunity that doesn't exist necessarily outside that place. So having said all of that, and to be clear that I would be extremely supportive of funding that's going towards the school's ability to navigate, and I know it'll take an investment. I'm curious, where in this budget have you been able to build in anything in terms of school climate, in terms of training? You mentioned that the administrators were getting some training in restorative practices. Has it gotten down to the teacher level? I'd love to hear more about where some of that investment is reflected here.
Yeah, I don't have the number offhand, but we've done a significant number of trainings under restorative practices. So the administrators, the deans, and those folks went through the full 3-day extensive full-day training. They've put together a more condensed version for teachers because we don't have the release time to take them out of classrooms for 3 days. So we've been doing cohorts throughout the year. We have several more still scheduled for this year, and we'll continue on next year. It's been a great partnership with RIASAP. It's a great organization that does a tremendous job in this area. And the feedback we got over the summer from the administrative team that it was one of the most impactful and powerful trainings that they've attended in many years. So we're just continuing to cycle through. And hopefully over the next couple of years, we can touch every staff member in the district with that training.
Thank you very much. I can say that I would encourage seeing that in a budget to show that, and would be very supportive to see an investment of funds that it can be, extended not just to teachers, but even to parents so that they know what resources are available to them in the schools if their child is having a hard time.
Yep, we're looking at revamping and putting together a special page that encompasses all the resources prior to the start of the school year that we can have parents and families be able to, like a one-stop shopping, and not have to go search through many different parts of our website.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see Representative Waldron has a question, but is there anyone that has one that hasn't asked one yet? Go ahead, Representative Waldron.
Thank you. Cindy Waldron, District 3, through you, Madam Moderator. I guess it's just a general comment maybe, and full disclosure, 3 kids have gone through here, so very happy. But I'm hearing a lot of, we're meeting the needs of kids. We're doing okay. What are we doing to excel, to go to a higher level? I'd like to keep, that momentum that Fairfield has had. And I mean, I'd love to support that, not just, the bare minimum. Not that we're doing that. I'm not saying that at all. I just would love to see continued excellence. And
Well, as we get further toward the end, you'll see the celebrations, because that is the reason why we do all these things, is to make sure our children excel and they're prepared to be successful after they leave us. So there's an awful lot of celebrations that we have throughout the school year, and we can highlight some of the big ones. But Fairfield is recognized at many levels through our athletic, our music, and our fine arts programs to be tops in the state of Connecticut. So we're proud of the work that we do. The district does have a district improvement plan, which has specific metrics that we try to meet every year, and we work to continuously improve. Some of our work this past year and a half through a consultant has been around continuous improvement cycles, and we're working with our administrators at every school to implement 90-day improvement cycles. So to focus on areas within their building that they identify as needing to be addressed, and we follow up with them periodically every 30 days to get progress monitoring updates on those improvement cycles, next steps. So we are emphasizing consistently constant improvement throughout all our schools, so we can meet and excel as we move to the future.
Is it okay if I follow up? Also, I just want to piggyback on the district improvement plan. So we are required, as all districts are, to have a 5-year district improvement plan, which we are in year 3 of that right now. So the board set aggressive targets across several domains, one being academic, obviously. One high-level goal is that all second graders by 2027 will be reading on or above grade level, as one example. We've also have subgroup population disparity data by subgroup population across subject areas and grade levels. So we're really looking into disparities between subgroups of our students and addressing needs in this budget, and also going forward in terms of meeting, being able to close those gaps and close those disparities. We also have SEL targets, chronic absenteeism, school climate initiatives. So if you take a look at the district improvement plan on our website, you will see a lengthy, extensive list of targets that we have set. Challenging, I'm sure, because they are, I would say, very aspirational. But also every school building has its own district improvement plan as well, and to align to the district level one. So you can actually click on any school that you want to look at and look at where they are, where they're trying to go on a year-to-year basis in order to get there. Because every building is different and every building has different kids in it, as well as elementary, middle, and high are different. So not only do we have that extensive plan for the district, but for each building as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that and all the efforts you guys are all doing.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Estrada.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 1. And if you're going to address this at the end, that's fine, but this seemed the perfect segue to that. So in terms of excellence, because I think that's what everybody wants here, how are our kids doing in reading, writing, and arithmetic?
They're doing well, but they can do better. And that is part of the reason why we spent the last year plus in preparing for next year for a new ELA curriculum that's being rolled out. Because we saw that our numbers were very good, but they were flat. So we're looking at improvements to our curriculum, to our delivery of instruction. Again, complacency doesn't have a home here in Fairfield. We're looking to push our educators, push our administrators, and push our central office staff, including myself, to ensure that we're showing positive growth. We have new internal assessments that we rolled out this year that really focuses on growth targets and to ensure that we're talking about data. And all our schools and specifically our teachers know where their kids are, how much they've grown, and what growth targets they need to meet throughout the school year from assessment to assessment. So
How do our students do on whatever standardized tests they're required to take?
which students? So our elementary and middle take the Smarter Balance Assessment. Our students do very well.
Yeah.
But we want to do better.
What has been the trend?
Our students have done very well, but
Are they trending up, or are they trending down, or are they flat?
They've been pretty flat. So this year we're hopeful with a lot of what we've done, we'll see a trend upwards. We may not see a huge jump, but next year and over the next couple of years, we're anticipating to see significant growth by all the efforts that we're putting in place now.
So next year you expect to begin to see the benefits of the spending that you are doing now and the programs that you're putting in place now?
Well, we could see a drop backwards. It'll be year one of a new curriculum. So teachers are being trained now on implementation. But I can say that if we don't see the results over the next few years, we'll have to make adjustments to our practice. But it takes some time to see the results in education. What we have seen from cohort to cohort is slow growth, which is positive. But if you don't see that growth in year one or year two that you anticipate, it's a slippery slope. You don't want to abandon ship, because we're really trying to change practice. And for teachers that have done something one way for a long period of time, it takes a little bit of time to get them into new practices, new habits with new curriculum.
No, I applaud that. I know change in anything can be difficult. But the reason I asked that question is because to me, those are the fundamental skills that children need to succeed later on in life. And the frustration that somebody like me has is I look at the school budget and, again, it's one of those things. Enrollment goes down, budget goes up. Enrollment goes up, budget goes way up. It's a one-way slope. And I think, Representative Havey, some of her comments, I think derive from the fact that, you look at enrollment, you're serving less people, but yet you still need more people to service those people. And I get all the reasons why, right? I understand that there's not easy answers to these questions, but, I sit here and I say, we're going to spend a lot of money because it's a lot of money. The taxpayers in this town are paying a lot of money for the school system. They expect the best from our children. And I just want to make sure that the plan is in place to begin delivering that and getting better results year after year for the money that we're putting into the school.
Well, I think that's our plan as well. But to address your one point, we see a slight decrease in enrollment. But the number of kids that have profound needs is going up. So in the last 6.5, almost 7 years, 12% of our population were identified as needing special education services. We're at almost 19% now. And this is a trend that's following the state trend as well.
Right.
So we may have slightly less students, but slightly less students with a lot more need.
I totally get that, which is why I said that, it's not necessarily an easy answer to that question, but you just look from a logical standpoint and you say, okay, it's what gives. But my point at the end of the day is, we're going to spend a lot of money and we're increasing your budget, higher than the rate of inflation, right? We expect results, and I hope you guys are prepared to start delivering on that.
I think we deliver on those every day. I think it's slightly above inflation simply because for many years, if you look back, Fairfield did not keep up with spending. So it's kind of now the chickens are coming home to roost, so to speak. I also want to say that
Just to on that point, I mean, I look back at the numbers that you guys have provided over the last 20 years. The budget increases have generally exceeded the rate of inflation, so that's not legitimate.
again, and I think the first selectman mentioned it as well in his opening, housing values in this town has gone up higher than the average market too. And I think that's a testament to the schools. People aren't moving to Fairfield for the nightlife. They're moving here to go to school and send their kids to quality schools. And the special education parents have specifically sought out our community. Many have expressed that because of the high level of quality services that we provide in district. So I think it's a testament to everyone here in town and on the Board of Ed who are committed to high quality instruction and teaching and learning.
Yeah, no doubt. It's a great town to live in. But again, I want to see more for the money that we're spending. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Rock.
Dave Rock, District 2. Can I get an explainer on what I see on page 5, our rankings, our AEN, GLC, and then the PPE. It's the far right column on page 5. And I just wanted to, if you could go over the trend as it relates to Fairfield, and can you maybe take us back and then walk us forward through those numbers? I think that will help us understand.
Sure. You're talking about the adjusted equalized net grand last per capita to the per pupil expenditure. So this chart starts at 2003, 2004 in previous budgets. I'd really suggest going back to 2000. Basically, what the adjusted equalized net grand list per capita is a ranking that the state used for wealth rank of each municipality. So in that column, you will see for each year where Fairfield ranked for its wealth ranking. And then you will see the per pupil expenditure ranking of the school district and relative to all the other districts in the town. So as you can see, for a great number of years, there's been a range in terms of Fairfield's wealth ranking here and there, because obviously that's relative to every other municipality, right? But yet there was a significant decrease in the funding for education over a number of years in this town relative to that wealth ranking. And starting, about 18, 19 or so, we slowly have started to come back up from that. So that's just an easy explanation. The other columns are what the Board of Ed asked in terms of their budget requests for the year versus what the town appropriated, and then the increase from that. So then you have your percent change. So if there was an extra column in here that showed what the variance was, that might be helpful as too, but I can tell you it's not a small number.
Great. So we're trending back towards hopefully our, 2004, 2005, 2006. I mean, those are numbers that are almost in line with each other. And then we saw a huge drop, almost like the bottom fell out. We were not attending to our kids. And now I guess it looks like we're inching back or getting closer towards the two numbers that are, should be in line with each other. If you're thinking about this correctly, is that a good way to think about it?
Slowly but surely. And as you can see, if it wasn't for the teacher's contract this year and the increase that we so desperately needed with the paraeducators, I mean, we'd be looking at maybe a 3% ask. So I think it's a pretty lean budget. My philosophy is not to ask for a lot, knowing there's a possibility of a cut and then get where we need to go. It's to ask and build a level of trust with all the town bodies to make sure that they understand very clearly that we're only asking for what we need and not beyond that.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Representative Carroll.
Thank you. Chris Carroll, District 8. I want to follow up on, I think, Ken's question in a broader scope and to what Dave just brought up. I've been in this town 8 years and paying attention for about 2 of them. So maybe there's people who've been doing this a long time. But in the early 2000s, it appeared as though that ratio of our spending versus our ability to spend, and then that went off the rails. And I don't know the history of that and why. But to Ken's question, and I know these things take time to improve, take time to fall apart. And is there, and you haven't been here that long either, but maybe you understand this. Did we lose our ability to educate our children during that period? And, you know, probably not in year 1, but it's going to take time to get back there. But did we lose it?
I don't think, after doing a little history lesson and doing some research, I don't think we lost our ability. I do think, though, that was on the backs of staff. The teachers, paraprofessionals, the staff that serve our students were underpaid for a long period of time. So those salaries are reflected in this, in the per pupil expenditure. But we can't be that way anymore. It's just too highly competitive. If we don't compete, we will lose teachers in droves, because where in the past, maybe we'll just use a Weston, for example, would have 3 or 4 vacancies to pull from other districts. They're seeing mass exodus of teachers. You know, Monroe, for example, is one of the second highest paid teachers' contracts in Fairfield County and in the state compared to Greenwich. It's a little town in up north a little bit, but so, and we've lost significant people over the last year to Monroe. So it's at a point now where this teacher's contract, hopefully for the next couple of years, will give us a more competitive edge, but we could drop significantly if we don't continue to stay with that trend.
I'll piggyback a little bit since I was around during those times. You know, there was strong advocacy from the community around those times in terms of trying to keep things away from the classroom, so to speak. That wasn't entirely done, but what we saw, and this wasn't unusual for other across our nation as well, things like maintenance got really deferred. Technology investments and upgrades got really deferred for a long time. So when COVID hit, the 2 areas that we were really behind on were building maintenance, air filters, technology, infrastructure, those types of things. But yeah, there were some things that were lost during that time that hurt, but slowly but surely we are trying to bring things back. But it's a new world, you know, in terms of what our needs are, in terms of today's education and what kids need. And as Mr. Testani stated, the demographics of Fairfield student population have significantly changed since that time as well. So there's more of a focus on our subgroup populations and meeting special education. And we've been lucky in terms of getting those technologies back now since COVID, and really still trying to take away at our maintenance that we have in all of our buildings and taking care of our facilities.
And I think one of the things that everyone needs to recognize, and I think it was brought up, the budget has increased significantly over the years. A lot of that, though, is because mandates have come into place and no funding behind it. So it's all been left on the backs of local taxpayers in towns like Fairfield. So the funding source needs to change, and I think the advocacy at the state and federal level needs to increase, because I'm not sure how much longer, to your point, local taxes can provide the necessary services to maintain high-quality services solely. If the state doesn't continue to put mandates without money behind it for places like Fairfield, it is all going to be left up to local taxpayers, and that's why you're going to continue to see budgets grow.
I think Ms. Laborious wants to say something.
And I just wanted to say one last thing, that the angelic that we were just talking about, that factor is, to Mr. Testani's point, that state mandate, that's a factor that's used to determine how much reimbursement we get from the state for excess cost, which is the reimbursement for students with high special needs, 4.5 times our per pupil spending. So it's ironic because that is a factor that's determined, and it's dropped our funding as a result of that, pretty significantly this year and also next year.
Thank you. Representative Walk.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And through you to our superintendent and our chair of the Board of Ed. So I've been an advocate, many people know, for HVAC and air conditioning in our schools ever since coming on this body. And I'm really elated, I'm really happy to see that the project has started. So my question to you guys is how long do you think all the schools, what year do you think all the schools will finally be done? And is the project starting now, right? We're starting to do some of the schools, correct?
Yes. We have 3 schools starting in the next couple of weeks and will be completed by the start of the school year, knock on wood, if everything goes as planned with contractors and everything else. But I think it's a long way in the future till all schools have adequate HVAC and air quality.
But monies have been appropriated for all this, correct, down the road?
For the first 3, but money's not appropriated for places like Dwight and Jennings in Tomlinson.
So we have to advocate more.
We have to keep advocating, keep the fight up.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you.
Any other, 1 second, Representative Pistilli's online. Is there anyone else who hasn't had a first question? Representative Pistilli.
Well, thank you, Madam Moderator. I just had one comment. Conceptually, with respect to the unfunded mandates, Fairfield taxpayers are most likely like net payers to the state. And so, if we're not seeing funding for this at a state level, we'd likely be taxed more on our income tax at a state level and then not see that effect come back to Fairfield. So we're probably better off that some of this is an unfunded mandate that we fund ourselves. I just wanted to make that comment. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative Pistilli. Representative Estorita.
Yeah, just to follow on that, can you elaborate a little bit more on the unfunded mandates and their impact on the budget? Because I'm not really familiar with that.
So with the right to read legislation that was about over 3 years, a little over $1.5 million in new resources. The special education, the continuation through the year of the 22nd birthday is over $622,000. The excess cost is over $1.2 million that we didn't receive in reimbursement. So it starts to add up. Kindergarten cutoff, which we're going to touch upon in a second, with the increase of our ECC full-day classes due to the change in law when children can start kindergarten has moved. So we have September, October, November, December babies that do not need to move forward to kindergarten anymore and can stay back in preschool for an extra year. So these are just ways that they've added the burden and shifted it back to districts, but no money has followed with them.
Have some of these mandates ever been funded by the state before and it's just stopped? Or?
No.
Okay.
We did get a small grant for the right to read, but it wasn't significant enough. It probably covered about 15% of the cost.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Britton.
Peter Britton, District 1. You mentioned about the special needs and the percentage having increased significantly. Is that commensurate with the other school districts, that percentage, or are we higher or lower?
I don't know about all the school districts, but we are trending exactly with the same as the state. So I'm assuming that it's pretty consistent across the state in the same time frame.
And how about nationally? You think that
I'm not sure nationally. I really don't really follow some of the national trends when it comes to special education, but for the state, it's again trended exactly the same. They're almost 19%. We're almost 19%.
Thank you. Any other questions? I guess you can go on with your second part of your presentation, a couple seconds later.
No, no problem. We'll just move. Some of this has already been asked and answered, but we'll go through it.
Sorry for those of you online, we weren't speaking because they weren't able to forward their presentation. So now that they are, we'll let them go ahead.
All right. So we are looking to restore, somebody mentioned the teams at the 6th grade at Fairfield Woods Middle and Fairfield Ludlow Middle School. What that means in grade 6 right now, rather than having full teams where one teacher teaches each of the academic subject areas and is able to focus on that one subject area, we have teachers that are teaching multiple. So one teacher teaching math and science, one teacher teaching language arts and social studies. That is not happening at Tomlinson. They have full teams across the board. There's a lot of benefits to that. Obviously, they only have to prepare for one subject area, one lesson. They are more content area experts in that area. When it comes to meeting time, they're able to come and plan properly. They receive the proper professional development on district professional development days with the content area that they're teaching, not have to be split, sometimes in with one department, sometimes with the other. And we also want to make sure, since 6th grade is a transition year from elementary to middle school, that we're able to support students properly in the transition year. Right now, the feedback we've gotten, that teachers have done a really good job. However, they fall a little bit short in comparison to those other teams that are full teams within the school and also at the other middle school. Just want to go back one, but the expansion of the early childhood, again, this was in response to the change in legislation. Children do not have to start kindergarten any longer. If their birth date falls from September 1st to December 31st, parents have the option this year. We're hoping that the legislation gets amended a little bit to give us a little bit more direction. So we have some kids that parents have elected to move them forward. We gave them the option this year to give us a little bit more time, as many districts have, so they will move forward to kindergarten. Others have elected to keep them in preschool an extra year. We did not want to continue with those, what we call our 4+ kids, with a half-day program. So we've established three full-day program classrooms. As I mentioned earlier, they have been fully enrolled, and we have a waiting list. So we're anticipating to see a little bit, hopefully, of an increase based on after all the financials are filled out on those students and those families, that we can see a little increase to revenue. But that is the main focus in the expansion of the ECC. Again, the 6th grade classrooms. And then we have some monies going toward our facilities. This includes compliance with indoor air quality mandates, as we just talked about. We also have some funds in the budget to continue the security upgrades that we've talked about in the past outside of We cannot speak, in general, but at Fairfield Ludlow High School, Fairfield Ward High School, as well as baseball backstop and dugout improvements at Fairfield Ward to our state championship baseball team. If you've been over there, it desperately needs proper dugouts and a real backstop. So that hopefully will begin over the summer in preparation for next year. We want to continue, as everyone's mentioned, to provide high-quality instruction and teaching and learning through the right to read legislation and the change in our ELA curriculum, the monies that have been dedicated toward professional development, curriculum writing, and also new resources. We want to be able to maintain our small class sizes at the elementary level to provide a more personalized approach to teaching and learning. And of course, we're focusing a lot on quality instruction that doesn't only include materials and technology, but also professional development for our teachers, our coaches, and our administrators. Again, we've talked a lot about the benefits of a multi-year strategic assessment. So we're going back and continuing to look at some of the initiatives that were taken in previous years, or looping back to have discussions around the table with all our stakeholders, teachers, administrators, and folks, students and families, if some of these things have provided the bang for their buck when they were initially introduced, if we need to abandon, if we need to switch gears or make adjustments. We try to be strategic in our resource allocation to lower our immediate financial request and distribute costs over multi-years. And again, we try to be efficient in our end of the year, if there are any monies available, to try to pre-buy as much as possible to reduce the impact on the following year's budget. And I think we did a great job last year with some of the surplus dollars, which has resulted in a lower ask this year. And again, I think if you have looked at our neighboring districts, we are one of the lowest asks in the area when it comes to the budget increase this year, despite the contractual obligations in the new teachers contract and paraeducators. We've streamlined our school-based budgeting purchases. We've tried to be smart in our software acquisition and licenses, not to overlap with other licenses and software that we had in the district. So we did an inventory of what was being used, how often it was being used, and by what grades. And we were able to shift away and create some offsets. We implemented a new print management strategy to decrease copier use, which is providing savings this year. So we're proud of that as well. And we did adjust some bulk ordering of our resources for the reading materials and science equipment to meet actual needs and not to avoid having excess. So some of the things we talked about in the FTE, we shifted some stuff from grants and over into the operating budget because we know grants sometimes are not predictable. We had an increase in para-funded positions, but no additional funding was necessary for that because we did find some offsets. We did have a return on investment and cost avoidance in the new CLC classes over at Jennings School. We had an increase due to sections increases at our elementary schools that caused classroom teacher and also specialized related arts increases. We had some slight adjustments at the secondary level to meet the needs and the requests of students who wanted to take additional classes with strings, math, science, and family consumer sciences. We did meet our mental health student need by increasing our psych, social work, and counselor services. And then, of course, because of the additional identification of students requiring special education services, we wanted to add support in that area. Hopefully that will have an impact on reducing the prevalence rate as we move into the future. This is just a brief chart. You've probably seen this in the past of what our specialized in-district programming and what that would compare if there was a chance that we would be able to find placements, which I highly doubt we would in out-of-district placements. There's just not enough support out there to be able to do that. But if we were able to find suitable placements out of district for these students, it would cost us in excess of $16 million additional dollars to this budget. So that is one of the things that we're very proud of. Not only do we have high quality in-district programming, we're also saving the taxpayers over $16 million. Again, as you can see, we do have the projected totals. What's driving this is as Jen mentioned, these are projections. We haven't had actuals yet. We'll get a better sense of that throughout the summer on how we're going to start the year. But then it's ever changing as more and more children enter the district throughout the year. This is a trend that I think we're going to see continue. I think, as you have seen, it's a very low housing inventory market right now in Fairfield. So people are buying when they have the opportunity to buy. They're moving into town when they have the opportunity to move into town. So we're going to start to see more and more kids enter into the district after the year has started. She mentioned 78. That was at last count. I think we've had a few enter since then in preparation to finish the year with us and start the new school year. So we're watching enrollment very carefully. The board is looking at policies on how to best address students that enter the district, especially at the elementary level, that increase our class size beyond our capacity limits, and how best to service those kids and not have a large impact on the budget after it's been passed. Again, over the next several slides, and I'm not going to go through in depth, but when we talk about what's the return on investment and why parents move into this town, our Fairfield Public School students achieve at a high level. We had over 265 actually, students who earned the seal of biliteracy last year. We had 83 students selected for the Western Regional Festival. We have 2 schools of distinction that were recognized this past school year, 3 national merit semifinalists. We have a grade A rating overall. We have 135 AP scholars in the district, 75 with honors and 119 of those with distinction. And 83% of our students that took the AP exam earned a score of 3+, which is extremely high achieving. 91% of our students participate in post-secondary education. We provide early college experiences with collaboration with the University of Connecticut, Sacred Heart University, Norwalk Community College, the University of Bridgeport, Quinnipiac University. Out of our 2023 class of graduates, they were accepted to over 145 colleges and universities. High school students engage in a variety of art, drama, and music programs, very robust programming across all our high schools. And Ward and Ludlow students participate in probably the highest number of varsity athletic and sub-varsity athletic teams, if not the highest, close to it across the region. We have over 2,500 students rostered on our sports teams. 46 participated on National College Signing Day. We had 8 FCIAC championship teams, 8 division champions, 122 all FCIAC recipients. We had 4 teams win the state championship and 57 all-state recipients. That's in our athletic programs. And as you can read here, our art program is extremely high achieving. Fairfield Public Schools received the Congressional Art Award for District 4. 16 students passed the rigorous AP art exam. That's no easy feat. 19 of our students were named Scholastic Art Award winners. Art students from across the district participate in community outreach projects through murals, exhibitions, and partnerships with local organizations. We had over 1,000 visitors attend our annual townwide student art show last spring, and a number of other opportunities that are afforded to our students in the arts. When it comes to the music department, I'm sure you're all well aware, you've probably attended one of our high school concerts, especially at the holiday time. If you haven't, I encourage you to do so. Our students also provide and participate in the Veterans Day concerts. Many of you have attended those or participated, and performances throughout the year in collaboration with the town. And then our middle and high school students in the band march in our Memorial Day parade. We were rated best in community for music education in the top 5% in the country. So there's quite an accomplishment there. Again, 83 of our students were selected to audition and participate in the Western Regional Festival. 86 of our middle school choir students participated in a collaborative with the Boston Children's Chorus. 30 middle school students were selected to audition in the Western Regional. And of course, our townwide music festival unites all our music students under one roof for a performance at Fairfield Ludlow High School. I would ask you if you had any further questions, but I think you're all done from earlier.
Any other questions? Representative McDermott actually did.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mark McDermott, District 9. It's probably not related to this budget, but I noticed these new lighted signs at the high school gyms, the mascots, the Falcons and the Mustangs. Where did that money come from for those two new signs?
Through the athletic departments, a lot of hard work by our athletic directors, and they've been a big hit across town, and students are really happy to see the pride that the schools are taking in the athletic programs.
No, they look great. I just was wondering, I know we didn't improve anything over the last couple of years for those, so I was just wondering where the finances came for that. Thank you.
Representative Havey.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Through you to the superintendent. Sorry, you mentioned earlier that there's legislation for reading that you're implementing. I was curious, I noted, and I was just going to make a comment before I heard that, about the slow reductions in library funds for the schools. A lot of the schools are down quite a bit again over last year, over the previous year, over and over and over. How do you reconcile that?
So with the materials and the resource that we purchase, there's significant number of text and titles that come along with it. So part of the $1.5 million investment provides classroom libraries in the schools with a robust number of titles that are part of that purchase. So that's where the money is. That's where the backfill comes from.
Thank you very much. Happy to hear that.
Any other questions? Representative McDermott does have another question that he forgot to ask.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I apologize. Mark McDermott, District 9. Another year older, so the memory's going as of Saturday. Chromebooks. I know my older daughter graduated in 2019, basically never used it, used her iMac. My current junior at Ludlow uses her iMac, doesn't even have the Chromebook. Has to go to the library to, I guess, borrow one when she has to use it for a specific class, maybe. Are we getting fewer of those? Are fewer students taking them? Is our budget going down for those? What's the situation currently?
So we started with last year's budget. We purchased Chromebooks for students entering middle school and students entering high school. So you will have the option to take a Chromebook, keep it for 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, then you turn it back in. Same in high school, you have the option of taking it in 9th grade, you carry it through 12th grade, and then they get dumped backwards. So we're very cognizant of keeping a good inventory now in just those grade levels so that we know where we need to replenish and replace or refurbish and not just purchase in bulk and have them sitting around, because we know after a year or two that those things are usually obsolete pretty quickly.
I mean, are most high school kids using their own computers? Is that, or is there a percentage of?
There's a mix. I wouldn't say most. I would say a high percentage take the Chromebook. A lot of the things that that we do, you know, especially with district testing and things like that, need to be done because of the interface. It can't be done on a private computer.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions? Thank you all so very much for coming. We look forward to seeing you on budget night, which I believe is May 6th.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
Thank you. First Selectman Gerber, oh, actually, he stepped out of the room. I was going to let Mr. Actually, we're going to call up Mr. Cleary. Oh, that's okay. We'll have Mr. Cleary and Ms. DeMarco come up, and then First Selectman Gerber, before you go, I'm going to have Mr. Hyman go before you, if that's okay. So before us, we have Mr. Cleary here from the Health Department. If you could just give us a little bit about, I think we're starting with how it relates to the Board of Education budget first. Are you going to be able to do that for us?
Sure. So, the health department has, in the budget book, 52 staff. 42 of those are related to the school health program, including full-time nurses, part-time nurses, dental hygienists, health aides, audiometric screening aides, and the support staff at our office that support the school health program. And so that's our interface with the schools. We have staff in every public and private school in town.
And I'm sorry, for members of the board, I forgot to say the health and welfare page is page 187 in the budget book. Thank you. Does anyone have any questions regarding the school health related to the schools? Okay, go ahead on to the town.
Sure. So just from a revenue perspective, we just use the 3-year average going forward with that, and that's served us well in the past because there's no significant sort of regulatory changes or fee changes. Regarding the general fund budget, we have, I'm not requesting any increase in those line items that I have control over, the non-payroll line items. The payroll line items are going up according to contracts. We have 3 different contracts within the department, and the non-payroll related items, while you'll see some changes in the line items, we're not requesting any more funds. We've just moved some across to different categories where we're seeing some changes in spending there. And then the most significant change would be last year there was an additional private school in town, a small private school, Covenant School, that started, and based upon the student population there, we are compelled to provide full-time nursing there. So we've added 2 part-time nurses there. Though we think there's some reason to believe that those positions may not be needed for long, so we'll take it each year. But in discussion with the finance department, we've chosen to fund that out of our seasonal flu account, which we pay for nurses to do work at flu clinics. We have some surplus there that can handle that expenditure, and you'll see in the revenue line item, there's a transfer of $53,372 to cover that change. So we're not asking for additional tax dollars. We're just transferring money from one fund to cover that expense, and we'll play it by ear for next year if the need is still there. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Cleary? Thank you for coming and waiting for that. We really appreciate that. I'm not sure if you're a UConn fan, but if you are, go ahead home.
I am tonight.
Thank you very much. We're going to have Ms. DeMarco come up next from the Human and Social Service Department. You just have to hold the button down.
Thanks. All right, I will try to be as brief as Sans, but not that brief. I'll just start with a couple of highlights.
Sorry, just 193 for those of you.
Perfect. So I'll just give you quick highlights about some different areas. The senior center side of us, we have presently 6,997 members. Not all are active, but we're nearly at 7,000. About 3,100 are active members, meaning during the last fiscal year, they participated in a couple of programs at the senior center. As of January, we have a little bit over 1,900 seniors enrolled in active so far this year. That means taking classes, playing pickleball, coming to the center regularly, and that's pretty great for us. In social services, so far this fiscal year, we are providing services to 1,459 families. 90% are below the poverty level. It represents nearly 3,000 individuals, the makeup of the family members. They are receiving energy assistance, SNAP, DSS, social services, SSI, application assistance, Medicaid assistance, Medicare counseling, back to school assistance, campership assistance. And that number is up this year, but pretty consistent across the board, give or take, maybe 300 families. It ebbs and flows depending on the time of year. Finally, something that's exciting for us this year is the town, through social services, the schools, and the police department social worker are collaborating on the Fairfield Youth Mental Health Collaborative. And it's a special thing for us because all three areas from across the board have seen an increased number in the needs and concerns for mental health services, and we hear loud and clear from our constituents and the people we serve that that people are frightened and there's a lot to handle. So we've had programs on suicide and depression, eating disorders, social media, the struggle with boys, and as a mother of 4 boys, that is real. The next program is on May 8th, and that will be at the senior center, and that's called Positive Choices in Mental Health. It's the last one of the school year this year, and that's a social media influencer who took a big step back because of the impact comments online were having on her. And she's slowly getting back into it, but she learned a lot, and she's going to impart a lot of lessons, and that's open to everybody. And we have a father's forum once, I think it's twice a month, for fathers and concerns that are unique to fathers who are raising any age child. Okay, so I'll start with revenues. I estimated a little bit down this year, just simply because we're trying to encourage some of the seniors who aren't participating in classes because they are concerned about the ability to pay. We want to really encourage scholarships. So I just wanted to round down a little as we try to encourage that. That number might change a little bit, but that is the reason why that number is down a bit. And on the other side, the only real big change for us is that our fees and professional services are down a bit as we draw payments for some of the instructors out of the revenue we're bringing in through that bottom, that senior center programming, which is the last item on my budget there. That is up. We are paying our instructors out of the money that we are bringing in for our classes and for pickleball. We don't have an instructor for pickleball, but we do charge for that time. And we through the Human Services Commission, increased the rate of pay for teachers of our exercise classes from $50 an hour to between $60 and $100, depending on education, experience, class size. And that number reflects that increase in pay and our increase in programming. We have some amazing new programs and classes that have started, cardio drumming for one, a chair yoga, an additional weight training, just a lot of great things that the seniors have been asking for that our senior center director has been able to provide. That was fast, I know, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments? Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Mark McDermott, District 9. Julie, hi. You've had some nice renovations between the deck from ARPA funding and the senior center renovation. It looks like you don't have enough money to finish that. Have you requested some more money from the administration for that?
Well, the bathrooms will be done.
Okay, you had bathrooms and kitchen problem.
Within the HVAC.
Yeah.
will be done. That's out for bid. The kitchen will be able to replace the hood that's in there. That's very old. And then we'll go from there. We haven't made a request yet. We are working with the administration and trying to figure out with the waterfall, what to ask for and what we need. Our lunch program is changing because it's smaller. We're only offering 3 days a week rather than 5. It's a warming kitchen. So we may be able to dial that renovation back to some basics. We're just not there yet.
Okay. Well, you were under budget on the patio, so maybe you could ask them for that $22,000,
Right.
$23,000.
Yeah.
You haven't come before us in a while. I can't remember on any new buses. I don't think. It's been a few years.
We are awaiting the last delivery from a few years back, and you'll see me at the end of the month with a bus grant.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, Representative McCabe.
Michelle McCabe, District 4, through you, Madam Moderator. Hi, Julie. You said there's an increase in families coming to you for assistance. What's the percentage increase?
I didn't do the percentage increase. I would say maybe, I have to get back to you. I didn't do that math.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. And did you include rent assistance as part of some of the services that you provide the community?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. I just was giving some highlights of what the typical things are.
And have you seen an increase in that particular need, or is it remain steady?
Yes. No, there's definitely a need. There's fewer resources for that across the board. We did apply for the next CDBG that we would be able to use that for rental assistance. But there really are not the resources there once were for that across, just through the state, through us, through the SWACA Agency on Aging, things like that.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll ask through the moderator for some more information so you don't have to remember.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McCabe. Are there any other questions? Representative Ludwig-Sack.
Christine Ludwig-Sack, District 8, through you, Madam Moderator, to Julie. Sorry. Just wondering, for veteran services, would you elaborate just on the what that entails through Human and Social Services, separate from the counts?
Sure. So you mean the budget line, right? Right. So that money represents resources and financial assistance for veterans who come into the senior center and ask for help. We typically help with, in the same way we would with a resident, for perhaps medical bills or rental assistance or mortgage assistance. We limit that to $500 a year, same as we would with the town account, but a veteran would be able to receive both. So they would be able to get that boost.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative McCabe has a question.
Sorry, Representative McCabe, District 4. A quick question. Have you explored the use of EV for the bus fleet? Since I know that they're probably smaller and it might be possible to get those.
We have. The bus that we're waiting delivery on will not be. It's not a hybrid, it's not an EV. The state contractor for the new bus coming in, if we're lucky enough to be awarded that grant, we get awarded the funds for it, and then we decide when it's time to order the bus if we want to do EV or hybrid. They don't recommend an all-electric vehicle yet for this size bus. So we'll look at what the cost is of a hybrid. They have had some success with that. We just have to see what the cost is at that time of order.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Ms. DeMarco. We look forward, thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at the end of the month.
That's great. Thank you.
I'm going to call up Mr. Hyman now, and ahead of our first selectman. Thank you for coming out and waiting for so long. Mr. Hyman is the chair of the Harbor Management Commission. So he's like one of the only ones that have come before us that's not a town employee, and we really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and listen and learn all that you review and study. The Harbor Management Commission has responsibility for the oversight and safety and well-being of the harbor. And if you just close your eyes and try to imagine Fairfield without Southport Harbor, looking as beautiful as it does, it's a very different kind of, would be a very different kind of experience or town for all of us. And of course, harbors don't manage themselves. We have a harbor master, we have consultants that work with us, and we have a plan that we are implementing per state statute to keep the harbor safe, clean, and open. It's kind of the biggest doorway into Fairfield, in my view. This year, we're asking for a small increase in our budget, a one-time increase in our budget, which has been flat the past several years. I think flat for the past 4 years. Our budget is, we're asking for an increase to raise the budget to $24,162. Why do we need an additional $1,000 one-time expenditure? Lower Wharf. You may recall back in December of 22, there was a terrible storm that came through and tore apart the beautiful pier and dock that is on the rim of Lower Wharf and looks out into the harbor. That aging pier was just done in by the storm, and then other things happened and all that slipped away. That triggered a risk assessment by the town's risk manager, Peter Ritchie. And a risk management consulting team was brought in, and they assessed Lower Wharf, and they found not only was there no dock where there used to be a dock, but there are several other things that were at risk and exposing the town to risk. Uneven surfaces, irregular procedures with dogs. There were electrical connections that needed to be attended to. They have been attended to. And there were other risks, of course, swimming. At the time the risk management came there were no signs about swimming. And swimming is illegal in the harbor, although many people don't know that. And it's quite dangerous to swim in that harbor. So the risk management consultant recommended that a sign be constructed to advise people, to give people something to think about regarding the risks that they face when they come to Lower Wharf. Otherwise, the town would have given people nothing to think about in spite of all these risks. You may think of these risks as common sense, but personal injury bar feels otherwise. And it is the town's responsibility to warn people when there are risks. So you've seen signs elsewhere in our town, and Lower Wharf now needs to have a sign. So we had a sign development process working with the parks people, conservation, risk management, and certainly the town attorney, and came up with sign content. And then we designed a sign to resemble the sign that exists now at Southboard Beach, which is there probably for a similar reason. So we need the $1,000 incremental funding to create this sign and install it. And the sign has to be able to withstand the kind of sometimes 60-mile-an-hour winds that come in from the Long Island Sound and everything else that comes in. So this is not a simple little piece of wood. This is a pretty substantial sign that has to be weatherproof. We've gotten support from the Sasquatch Association, from the Southport neighbors that are in that area, and from many of the living people who signed the deed 20 years ago, handing over Lower Wharf to the town of Fairfield in a very visionary, generous gesture. One of the two deeds involved in that actually requires a sign that has certain language on it, prohibiting things like gunfire, drinking, things like that. Things you would think, wouldn't you normally not do these things? Anyway, we have to be more specific. We have to protect the town's exposure, and we need to have this sign. So That's what we're asking for, a one-time additional $1,000.
Thank you very much. And I'm sorry, I forgot to give the pages again, 93 and 94, if you haven't found them yet. Does anyone have any questions? Representative Carroll.
I apologize. It's probably somewhere in the budget. Isn't there revenue that the harbor?
Yes, there is.
Where is that?
That's the 102 account. There is revenue that comes in from moorings, indeed.
Okay.
And there is money in that account, but all of those funds are aimed at paying for the maintenance of the mooring, the installation of the mooring, the salaries for the harbor master, and all of the kind of equipment that's used to keep boats safely tackled. The Harbor Management Commission, when we were debating how to go about getting funds, thought about, well, couldn't we use that? But that would be tapping money used or provided by people that pay mooring fees, whereas Lower Wharf is a facility that's used by everyone and people from out of town too. And we thought it would be more fair to not tax the mooring people that come in who don't use Lower Wharf, they use the moorings, versus people that would be coming to Lower Wharf otherwise. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mr. Hyman, for coming. We appreciate it.
Thank you for all your good work, everybody.
Thank you. We're now going to have First Selectman Gerber come back up here with his team to start the administrative town and general budget. First Selectman's budget's on page 36.
So I'm going to start with the administrative part of this, combining a piece of page 49, I believe, in your, I'm not sure if that's what the number is on your copy, but it's the administrative services. And page 37, the First Selectman's office. So the Board of Selectmen voted to move the two part-time positions in administrative services into the First Selectman's budget. These two positions, one is the Constituent Relations Coordinator and the Communications Director. The Constituent Relations Coordinator was an existing headcount, part-time headcount. The Communications Director, as I mentioned in my introduction, is a part-time headcount, but is more hours a week and is a very seasoned communications person, and the hourly rate is higher. Those two were moved into the First Selectman's budget. So if you look, having done that and having backed out some of the adjustments the Board of Finance made, the major differences are, number one, the Communications Director, which is that line is over, it's about 90+ thousand, a little bit over 90,000. No benefits associated with that. So that is just the wage and Social Security. The First Selectman's office, other positions increased by 4%. That is mainly raises that were determined by the former administration, including the Compensation Committee for the First Selectman, but also the other, those were in place, I guess, at the end of the year for the other positions. So the total increase in those two pieces is about 17.5% at this point. It's mainly driven by the Communications Director.
Thank you. Are there any questions for First Selectman Gerber on this budget item? Representative Steele.
Thank you. Jeff Steele, District 3. So just, Bill, just so I understand, the communications director position, 93,600. So that's a part-time position. Is that like 20 or 30 hours a week? So what's the?
It's about 30 hours a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then what triggers benefits? The 30 hours, 31 hours?
Well, I believe it is 30, what is it, 39 and a half? Or what triggers benefits? I mean, there's two pieces of it. One is if it's a position, usually part-time is 19 and a half hours a week max, unless it is a position that is not a union position. And, the research was done by HR that we could have this position up to 30 hours without benefits because it's not a union position. So it's not just IRS, it's also, if you have a union position that you are filling with part-time, that could raise contract issues.
If I just clarifying that, the 19 and a half is if it tracks the THEA union, the rest of the positions can go at 29 and a half. So it's a 29 and a half. It's technically, I think, sitting in the budget at 30 rounded, but it's 29 and a half capped. And it's something that's more on the like professional technical side versus the THEA. So it can go up to that higher threshold and still remain without benefits as long as we keep it.
Okay, thank you. And
So,
then, yeah, go ahead.
It's budgeted basically for 52 weeks a year, but it really is something that averages out for the year. So when Lisa Claire, who's in this position, if she is on vacation, if she is sick, she doesn't get paid. But she does, on weekends, if there's something that she has to go to, Habitat for Humanity, things like that, she will be there for an hour or two.
Okay, and just as a quick follow-up, in terms of how you came upon that as the salary for the position, I guess that would equate to, I don't know, if you annualized it, you can't just double it, which would make it 186,000 because you said she's working about 30 hours a week, so maybe 120, 130,000 annualized. What precedent or what comparative are you using for that?
Well, you would have to, what do you say, if you were to take it down for benefits, normally you would equate that maybe to what, 70,000, 65,000, 70,000?
Yeah, 40 to 50 a year for benefits. Our fringe calculation is about 40 to 50,000, depending upon their package. So if you were to annualize that, 93, you'd be up somewhere around 125, 128, and then you tack on at least another 40, upwards of 50. So you'd be looking at like mid 160, 170 would be the cost back out to the town, call 160, 170 on the kind of mid end.
But considering, yeah, I mean, you would back off the 50. I was thinking of it in terms of a percentage, but yeah, if it's 40, 50,000 for fringe, you'd back that off, the 80. So, we're looking at someone who's used to make, more in the private. She ran her own firm and did PR on an hourly rate for commercial and, places like the Beardsley Zoo and other places like that for a much higher rate. But she wanted to try something new. So, I mean, it's sort of a discount to the market.
And just as a follow-up, just because it is a new position, it seems high, but when you created it, did you have a sort of a salary in mind, or was it what she commanded? Again, I don't want to get into personalities because it's not about her, but if a person were to come in highly qualified, is that sort of a negotiable position, or did you have in mind what you wanted to set for this position?
We had in mind, that we couldn't go and have this be palatable to to the public for much more than this. And her willingness to want to try some, government. She decided to take a cut. So yeah, it was negotiated. Now, I've talked about this a lot, but I need this position filled because the amount of work that at least the prior administration did among the senior level people on communications is something that it does detract from running the town, and there's too much for me to handle right now and spend significant amount of my portion of my day dealing with the press, which is nonstop, and dealing with putting this newsletter together, which has become something that the public expects. It's a lot of work. And what Lisa is doing day to day is, fielding the questions from the press and, formulating responses, helping to promote town programs, and like for things like, the UI monopole issue, she's helping coordinate at public advocacy among various groups and working on the newsletter. So I think the amount of efficiencies and processes and procedures that need to be put in place in this town, and given, I think I'm a good writer, but I think I'd be letting the town down if I spent a lot of my time on this stuff. So.
Thanks, Bill.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Pistilli, did you have a question or comment?
I'm sorry, I just typed never mind in the chat, but it's delayed. I apologize.
Oh, okay, great. Any other comments or questions regarding this budget item? Seeing none, thank you. We'll go on to FairTV. I think I saw Lee Camlet online. I think you're on mute. And it's on page 46.
I'm here.
Yes, we can hear you now. If you just want to introduce yourself and your role for FairTV.
Sure, I'm Lee Camlet. I'm a member of the FairTV Commission. I'm pinch hitting for our chairman who's away. I can go briefly through the budget. We have a new manager for FairTV, and we're paying him $15,000 less than we pay Jerry. But because our manager also has another full-time job, he works for the Board of Education, some of the duties that Jerry did have been put onto our freelance people. So we're asking for a slight increase, or no, we're asking for an increase in the freelance labor costs and for the part-time archivist, but we're overall saving money in the budget because your budget may show a $30,000 cost for a new server, broadcast server, which has to be replaced because the one we have is wearing out and is not being supported anymore. We've applied for a grant to pay for the cost of that server. We should hear any day whether that grant has come through. We were told by, I guess my understanding is that the Board of Finance took it out of the budget in anticipation of getting that grant. But I gather there's some agreement that if the grant should not come through, which we fully expect, that money would, the cost of that server would be covered.
Thank you. And just to clarify for those that might be a little confused, the Board of Finance did take the $30,000 out of the budget. They made that budget cut because we are expecting to get the grant, and then they promised that they would take it from contingency and they can vote on that at a later time if for some reason the grant doesn't come through. So we cannot add the money back in unless the head of FairTV comes to us and asks us to appeal that, which I don't believe they are going to do because the Board of Finance promised they'd take care of it if it didn't happen. Do I have any questions? I think so. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Jeff Steele, District 3. Just one question. So will the new server impact the quality of the coverage a little bit in terms of the yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. It seems like I should be looking over there, or looking over here. It just seems that there should be some technical improvements, and we see a lot of glitching out. And I look at the back of the TV, that looks great right now, but you know, there's plenty of broadcasts that just look like something from, you know, 1970. I just didn't know if there can be an improvement. I'm really happy to see that FairTV still exists. There's a huge following, more and more every year. I think it's great. People I wouldn't expect to watch it are watching it, and wow, yeah, saw that. Wow, that's great, you're watching it. But is this new server going to impact or improve the quality of the broadcast?
The server will certainly help. I suspect that some of your issue is with the Zoom rooms that were put into Sullivan Hall, into the Board of Education room, and into the fire station. Those are not in our purview. There have been some glitches with those rooms that are being cleared up. Those are under the purview of the IT department, but they are improving. And we're also getting some new equipment. Some of it has to do with microphones that have, you know, become obsolete that we're replacing. But overall, I think the quality is improving. It's, like I say, it's the Zoom rooms that have become the biggest issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Thank you, Mr. Camlett, for coming out. We appreciate your. Mr. Bishop, did I see you online? Next up is page 66, Conservation Department, and we have Mr. Bishop here from the Conservation Department.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. I'll start off, I guess, in my budget on the expense side. I think I'll just point out that the two biggest changes in my budget expense-wise are related to line item 57000, and the capital reflects a loss, an expenditure of $55,000 for a dump truck that was ordered and not yet received. Still waiting over 6 months to take delivery of, but that large expenditure reflects that item. And then my current request for a new position that I've created in the department of natural resource specialist carries the increase in the regular payroll. A few other things that were dollars that were shuffled around from one pot to another on the expense side, and overall reflection of the revenue is a slight increase, but in general pretty flat.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Bishop? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you.
We're going to skip the town clerk for right now, since she's got to be here all night, and we're going to call out Mr. Wagner, who's here in the audience, and Ms. Pilati, who's online, the registrars of voters, and you'll find that on page 51. I'm not sure which one of you wants to start.
Good evening. I can start if you want, Matt, or it's up to you. You're physically present, so you want to go first?
I'd be happy to have you make the introductory comments if you have some.
Sure. Basically, the budget is down from last year. We had the removal of the full-time secretary, and we also have an increase in our seasonal payroll, mainly due to an increase in part-time office hours. to replace the full-time secretary. Also a slight increase in printing and binding, mainly due to early voting ballots. But overall, seems to be a decrease of about 7.12%. And Matt, do you have anything to add?
Nothing specifically about the numbers. I guess I would say, I know from talking to some members of the RTM that I know there's a lot of interest in early voting as a subject. We just completed our first election with early voting very recently, so we have a little bit of experience. It is what I would perhaps call a highly dynamic policy environment where the rules sort of surrounding what we're expecting to happen in the fall are sort of changing and evolving as the state and the Secretary of State's office absorbs kind of our experiences. But we'd be happy to talk about that with anyone here if that's a part of your decision-making process.
Thank you. Does anyone have questions for the registrars? Representative Havey.
Thank you. Representative Havey, District 9, through you to the moderator to Registrar Voter Wagner. My question is, and to Ms. Pilati, thank you. Sorry, I didn't mean to exclude you. Office with the changes, is it still staffed full-time? Can people just walk in off the street and expect to see somebody in the office?
I'll say that we are figuring out sort of how best to handle that. Right now, we have dropped back a couple of hours, a couple of days a week, just due to our the availability of the two of us. But we are there every day, 8:30 to 2:30 and until 4:30 for a couple of days a week.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Colburn.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Colin Colburn, District 8. Thank you both for being here. Curious, what was the rationale and reasoning for the reduction in the secretary position?
That wasn't our decision. That was done after we met with the administration, and that was done after our budget meeting and before the Board of Selectmen meeting.
Do we know if it was just due to lack of traffic or visitors or lack of work?
I could let my
First Selectman Gerber, do you want to answer that? Or
Frank McNeary, Budget Director. I'll answer part of the question, and I think the First Selectman can fill in any gaps. But there was a need in the engineering department for a secretary. As everybody knows, there's a lot of projects going on around town, and they had requested a full-time secretary because if they don't have a secretary, then one of the engineers would need to stay back and cover the office to handle any questions that would come up. So the thought was that we would move this position. We saw more of a need in the engineering department to answer questions from people doing business with the engineering department, and we included an increase in the part-time salary to cover the hours that might be lost in the registrar of voters.
Thank you. I'm curious, I actually am embarrassed to say this. I don't know where the Register of Voters is. I believe it's in Old Town Hall, probably. Yep. I'm curious if there's opportunity, knowing that building, I serve on the Economic Development Commission, and I know even up there, sometimes if someone's out, someone's sick, that upstairs is empty. I'm curious if there's potential to have resources be able to just move throughout the day or the week, depending on what's going on in Town Hall at that moment. Because I understand the reasoning, and I actually think, move people where the demand is. But I'm curious if we can take some resources that we have that were like that could still be, something like the Register of Voters, still be able to serve the people if they're coming into the office.
Yeah, I think the addition of some money for the part-time was to address that need. The town has, in the past, I'm thinking of the building department and the zoning department, but there was a floater that the town had experimented. This was maybe a few years ago. What you run into is problems of, just people having the expertise in the subject matter. So you could have someone float in between multiple areas, and they may be able to be there to take basic questions. But that was part of the issue that we ran into. But I think we expect with the part-time employees that we'd be able to fulfill the need and provide that coverage.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Representative Carroll.
Chris Carroll, District 8. I'm following up on that last question because I don't feel the true issue was addressed. I understand the robbing Peter to pay Paul. We needed somebody in one place. What's the impact? You got a full-time person. They're not there anymore. You're not adding a lot of hours. I heard you said there's some part-time hours, but you're not adding 40 hours a week of part-time hours. Was that person underutilized? They didn't need to be there these past few years. We shouldn't have paid them? Or I don't think that's probably true. What were the services they provided that are gone now, specifically?
I guess I would say that the services the department is able to offer scale up and down based on staff availability. There are a number of things that I think are maybe targets of opportunity we might not be able to pursue, right? And one thing that Registrar Politi and I have been discussing a lot is this question of, how far beyond the sort of the staff hours that we're being paid to do, or we going to have to do to sort of make things go, right? So to a certain extent, you depend on our personal commitment to fill in the gaps that arise, right? In terms of just maintaining the paperwork and doing the data entry and serving the public and keeping the office open. There are a number of different ways you could look at how to staff the office. And I think as I watched the hearings today, I heard from other departments about the value of redundancy and consistency, right? What would happen to our department if someone was on vacation, right? That's a consideration that you take, I think, in a lot of how you staff departments all over the town. And the benefits that come from those things, I think, are lost when you are either understaffed or you have part-time staff instead of full-time staff. Mr. Magneri was talking about the expertise essentially that you have, and I think that what you find, or what I would say, is that the ability to go and do tasks that are off-site and have a good level of confidence that the people who are left behind in the office answering questions from voters and things has the sort of institutional knowledge to do those things appropriately is maybe a cost that we have in this situation. I would say I would anticipate not being able to leave in the fall, right? I would delegate things like early voting or going to nursing homes to other people, not being confident that a seasonal person would be able to sort of answer complicated questions from voters living overseas or something like that. So I'd say do you have a good sense of kind of what I'm thinking about that?
If I may, I understand what you're politely saying is that you're being stretched. And as an observation, whether you believe it or not, there's questions about election and issues surrounding fraud and those kind of things, whether or not those are true. Those questions are there. We've added early voting. You have some responsibility for managing that. So we're making your job more complex and we're cutting the people out of it. I mean, it sounds like a problem.
That's certainly a concise summary, I'd say. Yeah.
I might add, it was a great loss to lose someone with 20 years experience during a time when we're adding early voting. Just a huge loss, really.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns? Representative Astorita.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Ken Astorita, District 1. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on that. Does it make sense for this cut in a presidential election year? I mean, I guess that's kind of the crux of the matter. I mean, I would probably be all for it. on November 6th, but does it make sense prior to that?
We have Mr. Becker here, our interim chief fiscal officer, and also for those of you online, I'm sorry, I didn't announce that Frank Magnieri is here, our budget director. So if you have any questions that can relate, but Mr. Becker has his hand up that he can answer this question.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. So on this, there were a number of factors when we were deciding what to do. The engineering piece was certainly one of them when we were looking at full-time headcount, seasonal and part-time across the entire town. That position, we did analyze whether or not that was actually being fully utilized as a full-time position in the registrar's office. At one point in time, it certainly was. But when we went through, including the registrars, when we sat down with them as a department, going through analyzing the analysis that they had actually done on how many times keying in the system for different things and where where that full-time person was or wasn't sitting, who they were allocating time to, how much was actually being split between the two. And in the end, we analyzed that we had a full-time employee that was very much so underutilized, that could be significantly more adequately placed in another department, fully utilized. We also went through what they were able to do. We're not just talking just random part-time employees being staffed. The registrars are allowed to have registrars, their deputy, which they each have. Then they're also allowed to have assistant registrars. If I have the count right, it's 4 per that they get to appoint. That's a much more stable. It is certainly a part-time and can be utilized in a seasonal capacity, but it's a much more stable position. And we went and actually reviewed that particular position is able to do more things within the systems. They have more statutorily. They actually have a number of things that they're able to do if they're appointed as an assistant. So we view this as a more stable path for each of the registrars between the two parties and the way that they staff this office throughout the year. So while they may be a couple of hours off per day in this initial window, we don't view that as something that they would need to do from a long-term perspective. They've been given the resources. They were given a significant allocation towards this part-time bucket. We expressed to them that if that wasn't enough, then we would go back and we would look at increasing that amount as well, particularly through what they need to do in this presidential year, early voting, other items. The full-time person was actually out for a significant amount of time, and they covered it with part-time and an assistant registrar. So this is not something that hadn't even been utilized in the past. So there were a lot of considerations, and I just want to make sure that that's clear. This was not taken lightly or without a plan.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It just seems though that in a presidential election year, and the point being made where, we're asking people to do more with less, but in an environment where every I that gets dotted and every T that gets crossed is going to be incredibly scrutinized. Do we actually create risk for ourselves that, either Mr. Wagner or Ms. Politi, God forbid they make some kind of a mistake because they're doing more than they've been asked to do in the past, and then that creates liability for the town. I mean, it just seems like cutting this position this year doesn't seem like it makes a lot of sense to me.
I guess I would say that regardless of who's doing the work, I mean, the registrars are ultimately going to be accountable for what happens or what doesn't happen or errors that get made. And that's
right.
That's certainly not new to us, right?
Right, but I don't want to put you in a position where, we're asking you to do a lot more than you've done in the past. And, you make a mistake because human beings do that. So what I would want to do is minimize the risk of those kinds of things happening. And now I'm not saying you put hundreds of bodies here, but if you had a person with experience who did undertake some of these tasks, and I don't understand the mechanics of doing an election by any stretch of the imagination, but it just seems like in a presidential election year that this doesn't make sense to be the position to cut. That's my point.
Do you guys have an answer? Or just more of a comment for?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's more of a comment, not taken lightly, I guess would be the point. And working with the registrar's office, I know that the prior person who's now in the engineering department is able to go over some during this transition window. So we did address that, and we had looked at it like it was more personnel hours cumulatively, but and done early in the season. But all, fair points and not taken lightly, and we're trying to make sure to support them.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Gerber. First Selectman Gerber.
Representative Gerber. I don't believe that we think, at least the administration does not think that this change will have any impact on the service provided. And, with between the two registrars and the part-time positions that are available, some of which are seasoned, that they should be able to handle it. Now, if it turns out that they can't, we can find more part-time, solutions for them. But I mean, there are a number of people, they just, need to work through a schedule.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Thank you both, Ms. Pallotti and Mr. Wagner. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
For your time.
Kathy Politi.
Sorry, Ms. Pleady. I apologize. Thank you.
That's okay. Thank you.
Next up, we have Mr. Barnhart here from Community and Economic Development, page 89. Welcome, Mr.
Good
Barnhart.
evening. Good evening, Madam Moderator, members of the RTM. Mark Barnhart, Director of Community and Economic Development. The big change here, the Board of Selectmen did provide some additional resources at their meeting in recognition of the additional responsibilities of the office, including those associated with staffing, providing staff support to two new commissions, the Arts Commission, the Fair Rent Commission. We don't fully understand what impact this will have long-term on the responsibilities of the office. So this provides us with some flexibility to bring in some additional contractual help or resources to supplement the full-time staff within the office. And that's pretty much it.
Thank you. Are there any questions for Mr. Barnhart? Yep, Representative Estrada.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Moderator. Ken Astorita, District 1. I'm going to be the skunk at the picnic here, but I would never say to anybody, hey, make as much as you can make, God bless you. But there seems to be like an $18,000 increase in the position. Is that just directly related to the new responsibilities you were talking about?
Which position are we talking about?
I think you should let Frank answer that, Mark, if that's all right.
Okay.
Yep, Mr. Mangieri.
So that was originally proposed. It was related to something that Human Resources and I have been researching related to longevity clause and department head policy. The Board of Finance did reduce that number. They moved it to contingency. So it's not an increase related to pay or new positions. It's just something that upon further research of this policy, it may be owed to an employee for longevity. And so that's why it was included in the budget.
So what's the number? What's the new number as revised by the Board of Finance?
So it was reduced by, let's see, 14,000. So the remainder that you see in there is just the cost of living increase. It's reflected as this current fiscal year's, but there's always a lag with the cost of living adjustments, but the remainder is just this cost of living adjustment. So the Board of Finance reduced the longevity piece by about $14,000.
Got it. That makes much more sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Barnhart, for coming out today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good rest of your night.
you. I think Ms. Simpson is online from Human Resources, page 84. I think I saw her at one point. Oh, she's there. Oh, there she is. Thank you.
All right, can you hear me? I can't get my video going.
We can hear you.
Okay, good. I'll try to see if I can get my camera going. It was working before. All right, sorry about that. Good evening. I was going to have our budget director get through the fun facts about insurance and that piece, if that's okay. Frank?
Yeah, sure. So
Okay, sorry.
this budget's kind of split into two sections.
Yeah.
There's the liability auto property risk management portion of the budget, which is the lower part of the expenditure piece of the human resources budget. That's just per our insurance consultants. Number was reduced by about property number was reduced by about 50,000 to reflect updated information from Assured Partners, who helps us with our insurance. So this, like I said, these are just numbers provided for the needs of the town for its insurance. And I can answer any questions if there are any related to those.
Thank you. Are there any questions regarding the HR budget and Representative Steele?
Thank you. Jeff Steele, District 3. I have two questions. First question is, and I don't know if maybe I should have asked the first selectman about this, or if this is an HR, but I understand there's a new chief administrative officer position that's opening. Has that been posted?
No, that hasn't been posted. We're in the process of interviewing for the chief financial officer job, and we'll do that first. But, down the road at some point, in the not too distant future, we need someone to sort of follow through with all these major projects.
Okay, because you have that budgeted in here, right?
We do.
Yeah. Okay. You don't know timing on it though?
No, I mean, it's definitely for next fiscal year. I would hope that we would have that in place by then.
Okay. Second question. I heard a lot of talk or saw some of it about cell phones for human resource employees. And I just wondered where are the cell phones here in the line items? And then I guess I would ask, are you the only department that has cell phones?
Can you hear me?
Can you explain that, what I heard the other night?
Hi, it's Kathleen Simpson. I don't know, we're not the only department that has cell phones. Many departments have them for many good reasons. One, if you want to ensure that you have no breach of security, because all my employees need to use cell phones for work, off-site, remotely, and in lieu of a laptop to get their email. So it's not a crazy thing. They're not allowed to use it for personal use whatsoever. They have to use it for business reasons only. I have a policy, a more stringent policy I put together, because apparently our policy I learned, which would not be mine, it would be more of a purchasing or probably a fiscal policy, kind of tighten that up. So the cell phones, I think it's strange that it's such a big discussion, because they're much needed. I have employees who are going to hearings. I have employees who are going to trainings off-site, going to different locations. We need to make sure that there's access to our shared drives, our email are not compromised. I want everyone in the same system. So I don't know. I don't think it's a crazy thing, but I think IT uses cell phones with everyone because they're going to be on the same line. And so I don't know if that helps. I don't think it's a huge expense, but I can't give everyone a laptop. So the cell phone is a good alternative.
Where is that in the line item here? Just under
Oh, I'm sorry. Frank, can you help me? I'm sorry. I'm having trouble with my.
Communications.
Yeah, thank you.
55300.
I see.
Thank you. Sorry.
Then how many, like, do all town employees have cell phones or just certain departments?
Not to my knowledge, it depends what you do. If you
Yeah.
you have to be a certain level employee with what you do. They're not given out in lieu of personal cell phones. You can't use them for personal use. And it also is, I find it kind of extraordinary about the fact that this has become such a big deal with my department, because trying to make sure that we keep things secure, trying to make sure it's separate with FOIA. I don't want people putting apps or things on and mixing, our email or communications with their own personal cell phone. It's not, again, you don't walk in and get a phone and not have to use your cell phone anymore. Plus, I don't want to get into situations where I have to pay a stipend or part of their cell phone bill because I'm making my staff use their cell phones for business. So that's really what it is about. I think it's been kind of like misunderstood.
Well, I appreciate your
Yeah.
comments on
Yeah.
what people think of the issue, but we're asking a question about your budget, so I appreciate the answer.
Wait,
Where
Representative Steele.
where does 650, just one last question. How does 650, that covers the entire plan or all phones? I'm just curious.
No, I think I told Mr. Walsh at the Board of Finance meeting that probably was an underestimate. So because there are a couple more cell phones issued. So I think it's higher than that.
I think we have answers from the administration staff over
Okay.
there. So Mr. Gerber or Frank Mangiero.
Yeah, it will most likely end up being higher than that.
650 is half a phone. It's just,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's probably going to end up, I would say, realistically being about 2,000 to 3,000. Now, that would just be an adjustment that we'd have to make in next year's budget. 'Cause we can't add any money to the line item, and I think that other lines of the budget would have to, for this year, make up for it, and then next fiscal year we'll make the adjustment.
okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I actually have some questions on this item that came up at the Board of Finance meeting. I was wondering, they were asking about travel and why it's increased and if COVID impacted it. If you're seeing normal travel, like for education or meetings, and if that's why that budget item has changed.
Yes, it was. A lot of the meetings we had, thank you. I think that we had before with COVID, a lot of the board hearings and the Freedom of Information Commission hearings, and they're up in Hartford or Wethersfield we have to go to. They now require live, or they want live presentations. So that changed. I have not sent my staff to any travel or meetings because we had COVID, and then we just didn't have opportunities to go for trainings or other meetings that might be beneficial. So we put that in there. Hopefully we won't need to use that much, but we also have town cars now, so maybe we can have access to those instead of having to worry about mileage reimbursement.
So your department has access to the town cars now?
We
And
don't
you
have a car, but there is a pool now. So if we sign up, I believe in advance, we probably could get a car if we had like a hearing to go to or a meeting.
And that's a new benefit that wasn't available previously?
No, we had a car, but it was this, they were the old cars that were, I guess not that reliable, so we didn't really count on them.
Okay.
We had a Crown Vic that was a little bit, kind of seasoned.
Okay, and that's why your travel and meetings and your educational and memberships have gone up? Those are both those line items?
Yeah, I wanted to hopefully get some more educational training for our staff. Then, because we haven't really done a lot of it. I think because of COVID, and then when I got in, it wasn't a focus.
Okay, great. And then I just had a question on the advertising line item. What's that advertising, like, what do you advertise?
We haven't had to, we use software or like a program called NeoGov for recruitment, and we haven't had to use outside sources for that. The thought is that we might have to with these higher level positions, like right now CFO, we're luckily we've gotten some great resumes, but when thinking about maybe having to use go outside that to maybe trade places or niche places, we may need to have to pay a price for that, a cost for recruitment. But that was the thought, because in the past, I guess that they had to do that, I guess, for my position, the budget director and the conservation director.
Okay, and online, like, software programs or Indeed doesn't provide that for you?
Not always. Indeed is like sometimes if you have to find like a niche kind of thing or something that it you need to maybe go deeper dive into things. Right now we've been lucky right now, but I anticipate that if we had a problem trying to fill a position that's very maybe requires more qualifications, that's not just something so broad, we might want to utilize more national advertising or something to that effect.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any other questions? Thank you. It looks like it's it. Thank you, Ms. Simpson. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you, everyone. I appreciate it.
All right, now we have Mr. Calabrese online. We're going to jump to Culture and Recreation. We're going to jump to the Carl J. Dickman Golf Course on page 235.
Good evening, everybody. Anthony Calabrese, Director of Parks and Recreation. Page 236 are the revenue numbers for the Carl Dickman Golf Course. You'll see overall we're looking at about a 5% increase in revenue. And on the expense side, for the most part, we held fairly steady, a slight increase of a little over 2%. Happy to take any questions on the Carl Dickman Golf Course.
Are there any questions regarding the Carl Dickman Golf Course?
Okay.
Representative Georgiadis, are you raising your hand? I can't, if you could put it in the chat, but I think it's hard to see is that Representative Georgiadis?
Yes, it's Representative Georgiadis.
Thank you. It comes in delayed for some reason.
That's okay. District 9. Good evening, Anthony. How are you?
Good, Drew. How are you?
Good. I didn't know you had a little tiny baby at home.
Sorry. Hold on one second. She's sleeping right now, thank goodness.
That's good. Okay, I'll hope for more sleep. Congratulations.
Thank you.
I live in the beach area. I am concerned about wetlands and whatnot. Is there any long-term capital plan to keep Carl Dickman less swampy? Or is that not a question for tonight? Is that a question for the future?
Well, the short answer is I don't have anything in the plans right now, but yes, it's something we should be looking at in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding the golf course, the Carl Dickman Golf Course? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Smith Richardson Golf Course.
Okay, Smith
239.
Revenues are on page 240. You will see a large increase. I don't know the percentage anymore due to the Board of Finance adding the driving range revenue, which you guys approved last month. That number went from 175 to 315. So we're looking at a pretty good increase there. And then on the expense side, again, things held relatively flat. Drivers in this one are the looks like the capital outlay line and seasonal payroll. Minimum wage did go up, so we've got some increases there, and then regular payroll is another driver. And and fees and professional services I see is that $50,000, which was the Top Tracer software. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions on the H. Smith Richardson Golf Course? Representative Cook-Littman.
Tara Cook-Littman, District 2, through you, Madam Moderator, to Anthony. Hi, Anthony.
Hey, Tara.
Good to see you.
Nice seeing you.
Thank you so much for answering my questions that I sent ahead of time about the pesticides being used on the golf courses. Really appreciated your answers and also the fact that the town is not using pesticides on municipal grounds by choice. I think that's incredible. But as you indicated, we're still spending about $100,000 on pesticides on the golf course. Is that the correct amount that you had provided to me?
Yep, between the two courses, that's correct.
Okay. So do you not spray any chemicals on the Carl Dickman course? Is it just?
No, we do. It's
You
between
do
both
those
courses.
two? Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess my question is, would you consider in the future phasing out chemicals? Because $100,000 is a lot of money to spend on pesticides. And that doesn't really account for the unforeseen cost of potentially opening the town to legal liability should there ever be a realization that the chemicals are actually causing harm to human health or the environment. So I'm just concerned about future liability, and also $100,000 is just a lot to spend on chemicals. So would you consider, I know you may not be able to answer that directly tonight because you have to speak with other folks, but is that something you would consider doing for next year?
It's definitely not something we would consider for next year. It would be something that would have to be thought about, and there would have to be a plan and a process put in place to fund for the organic process enabled to get the turf to be where it would need to be. And it would have to be a discussion with the Golf Commission to see that that's the route they would want to go. No, it's definitely not something I'm opposed to. But as I did point out in my email in your answers, there's only one organic golf course in the entire United States. There's a few that are hybrid, but majority are exactly what we do.
Can I ask a follow-up question? Through you, Madam Moderator, would you consider our golf courses to be even hybrid at this point, and using IPM techniques or just pesticides?
No, we use IPM techniques, but I wouldn't say it's hybrid. I think we're pretty standard in our practices up there.
Okay, thank you. Maybe in the future we can follow up on the side.
You got it.
Thank you. Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Hi, Anthony. I have a question about H. Smith Richardson. The item for the golf cart rental, it seems to be flat, even in COVID, about 425 went down and now it's back up to 425. Do you charge per person in the cart?
We do. What I have found with our course is most people like to walk, and more residents like to walk than drive. And what we have right now is we have more residents playing than we've ever had in the past, which is a good thing. And the golf course, the Golf Commission likes that. But that's ultimately what drives that number. I mean, it's people.
So one person in the cart pays X. The second person in the cart pays an additional X.
Mm-hmm.
So two
That's
people in the cart is twice what one person in the cart is.
There is another rate for a solo, but most times you're not a solo in a cart. Most are two people to a cart, and they do split it. I want to say the number is. I want to say the number is 18 per person, so it's 36 a cart. Again, I'm running that number off the top of my head. I don't have that in front of me, but I think that's what the rate is.
When was the last time the 18 per person was raised?
A couple of years ago, when we got the new cart, so maybe less than 2 years.
Seems a bit low.
It's in line with other courses.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Carroll.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Chris Carroll, District 8. Anthony, I'm not sure if this question's for you or this goes to the finance team over here. And I've been trying to figure this out in the book. Is when I look at the revenue for an H. Smith Richardson Golf Course. I assume that's all the revenue that they make there. I look at the expenditures, and this is only the expenditures by people working at the golf course. It's not fully allocated for the whole Parks Department. So all the overhead of Anthony's building and Anthony's salary and all of that, none of that is captured here. So it's not truly giving me a revenue loss because it's, you wouldn't operate this.
So
Take this person,
could-
you wouldn't
I could
operate
answer.
without you. So the percentage of you could do it by just all revenue, all expenses, allocation of overhead, or you could be
Yeah.
specific on hours. So
No,
I'm trying to understand if in fact we do that or we don't, and if not, why not?
If you were gonna, Anthony, I'll answer this, and then if you want to add on, but if you were gonna do like a cost benefit analysis, you wouldn't include his overhead anyway, because it's really considered a sunk cost, because whether Anthony had this golf course or not, he would still consider to be the recreation director, and much of his staff would be. So there's really not, I don't think it would be fair to say if his overhead, you wouldn't put his overhead in the calculation for a cost benefit, because it's just considered a cost. He would be there whether this golf course, if the golf course went away tomorrow, Anthony would be there along with the recreation facility and so on.
I'm sorry, Anthony, did you have anything to add?
No, that's okay. I know Frank did sum that part up. We do run a P&L. I believe it was sent to the full RTM during one of the pre-questions, where we actually include the bonding rates in there with health insurance for the full-time employees and the any benefits that are paid out to seasonals. But yes, we try to capture most of the costs. I would say we're getting majority of them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions on the Smith Richardson Golf Course? Representative Rock.
Dave Rock, District 2. Anthony, I'm just looking at my budget book, and I'm looking at the driving range revenue in fiscal year 25, and it says 175,000. So is that bumping up?
Yeah, Board of Finance raised that to 315.
So an increase of 140?
On top of that, yeah, that's correct.
Okay, great. And then your top tracer is, that's sunk cost, and that is in
Fees and professional services.
Okay.
You'll see that line increase by 50,000, and that's what
Right.
that accounts for.
And so that's an increase of 50 grand for the next 5 years, because it's a 5-year contract?
Correct. So that's 50,000 for this upcoming year, and it'd be 50,000 the following year and 50,000 the year after that.
Correct. So a commitment of $250,000.
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Steele.
Thank you, Jeff Steele, District 3. Anthony, regarding what Boca pays, that's under concession here. So that's $67,530 a year.
That's correct.
Is that pre-negotiated? Like, do they have just remind me, do they have a contract and that goes up by 1% each year, or is it?
It does go up each year. They do have a 5-year contract that was, awarded in 2021 with predetermined, they put the rates in there, and that was how they were chosen. So we know what their rent is for each upcoming year.
Okay, there's no profit share on their revenue too, right?
There is once they break the 2 million mark.
2 million mark in one given year, right?
That's correct.
How close were they in the last couple of years?
The very first year they operated April through December, because the course opened in April, the clubhouse opened in April. They hit 1.3 million. The year after that, they were at 1.65, I believe. And then this past year, they finished at 1.9 something. They anticipate that they will break the 2 million this upcoming year.
That's great. What are the percentages of the profit after that? How does that work?
I'd have to look back at the contract. I want to say it's in the neighborhood of 2%, but I could be wrong.
2% of anything over the 2 million.
Yeah, again, I'd have to double check the contract. It's on the town website, so I could find it easily.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Are there any other questions regarding this item? All right, we're going to move on to waterfront, page 224.
Okay. All right, waterfront, you'll see revenue, well, in your revenue book, it sounds like the Board of Finance changes have not been reflected. So on beach stickers, I think you're looking at 900,000, which is what I had carried last year and this year. That was bumped up to 940. And beach parking was bumped up to 285. So again, a slight increase on revenue. And then the expenses on page 226, again, you'll see drivers here really are seasonal payroll. These are all our majority of our parking attendants and our lifeguarding staff. Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Representative Barrett.
Steve Barrett, District 7. Thank you, Anthony, for being here. The aquatics coordinator job, a couple years ago, I think you told me that that person had about 40% of their job devoted to the waterfront, 40% to Penfield, and I think you said 20% other. Is that the same?
That sounds about, that sounds pretty accurate, though I think he gets hung up in the waterfront more than anything else, as I'm sure you know.
Now, so that aquatics coordinator job is not under the waterfront part of the budget. It would be under the recreation part, correct?
That's correct. Our full-time staff's carried in recreation.
Just as if the 40% of his job that's Penfield would also still not be under the Penfield part, it would be under the rec part. That whole job is under that, correct?
That's correct, yes.
The two assistant waterfront directors, I think there's two, correct?
Yep, that's correct.
And they would be entirely under the waterfront budget, correct?
They're in that seasonal payroll line, yep.
And so they would not have any duties outside of the waterfront?
Outside of waterfront and parking, correct.
Okay, excellent. And I think that's about it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? Oh, Representative Carroll.
I'm trying to connect the dots here. Penfield is going to be under construction.
That's correct.
All summer, right?
This summer, current summer,
Yeah.
yes.
But that will be affecting this budget or not?
It's a different budget item. We'll go
depends.
down a few lines. We'll get
Is
there.
that the next one?
The parking, beach parking and beach stickers?
I guess I said in this one, it covers most of the parking. It does not cover Penfield parking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we'll move on to Marina, page 231.
All right, Marina revenue, again, pretty stagnant. Everything is full as far as the marina slips go, boat racks. So again, you'll see that that's pretty stagnant. And then as far as the expenses on page 233, really, again, pretty flat. There's an increase in regular payroll. Again, this is a THEA position. And I believe they had step increases there. And it's really about it. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions on the Marina? I think Representative Georgiadis has a question on the Marina.
Yes, Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Anthony, when the marina needs to be dredged, does that go on the budget or does that fall someplace else?
It goes into the capital improvement project or on the waterfall chart. Normally those projects, the last one we did was the channel, and we dredged that for about $725,000. So they're large scale capital projects. It wouldn't be in the operating budget here.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Representative Havey.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Lisa Havey, District 9. I still think of the other district, sorry. Anthony, thank you very much for all the explanations. I have a question about when was the last time that dockage fee went up? And I ask this because of the discussion that happened at the Board of Finance. Everybody else has to pay more, even to go to the dump. Why aren't the dockage fees being adjusted as well?
The thought process, so first off, they were last adjusted, and again, I have my years probably mixed up, but it was either 2017 or 2019. And I apologize, I can't remember which one I said at the Board of Finance, but I know I was wrong because my marina coordinator, of course, corrected me the next day. The thought process was we were looking at improving the marina, either replacing it in kind, meaning it replace exactly what's there, keeping the 600 and so slips, or redesigning it and losing a few slips, but making it have more amenities and things of that nature. And then we would adjust the rates accordingly. It seems through discussions that I've had with the Parks and Rec Commission and in my office is that we're probably going to be looking at increasing the rates this upcoming off season. Which would affect rates for next year, which theoretically would increase this budget, but I don't know what those increases would look like yet.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions on this budget line item? Representative Georgiadis.
Drew Georgiadis, District 9. Anthony, one request, if you do work on increasing the slip fees, please try to talk actual dollars and not percentages, because the last time the percentage it was just a little out of control. So we need to talk actual dollars. So that's my request.
I agree with you 100%.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, we're going to move on to the Penfield Pavilion Complex, page 214.
Okay, Penfield revenues are on 215. You'll see that this overall budget is increasing almost 32%, and that is primarily because Penfield is scheduled to be completed with its remediation in late January, February of 25. So we are anticipating that we'd be able to pick up parties basically from April through June 30th. And that's where we're coming up with that increase. And then on 216, you'll see the expenses. Again, for the most part, pretty flat. Seasonal and part-time payroll. We use those lines interchangeably here to cover events, Penfield parking, things that are related to the building there, and nothing else really changed in this one. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Any questions regarding the Penfield Pavilion line item? Representative Waldron.
Cindy Waldron, District 3, through you, Madam Moderator. Can you clarify, you said through June 30th you expect? What about the rest of the summer? Or what am I missing? I feel like I'm missing something there.
So yeah, that's okay. Our fiscal year runs from July 1st of 24, that's this year, through June 30th of 25. So we're only projecting revenues from early 25 through June 30th.
Okay, thanks. It's kind of late.
Yeah, no worries.
Thank you. Any other questions? Can't tell if that's a delayed one. Representative Georgiadis, do you have another question?
No, that was the previous one. Thank you.
Cut off tonight.
I saved all my questions for you, Anthony.
You always do.
All right, let's move on to item number 213, recreation. Oh, sorry, recreation, page 213.
All right, recreation.
Seems like item 213.
All right, revenues for recreation are on page 221. You'll see some increases here, about 18% overall. Our swim lessons with our aquatic coordinator have done extremely well. So we saw a large increase there. So we're predicting that again. Another driver here is our recreation programming, which has done really well since coming back from COVID. And the Burr Mansion, you guys are looking at, I believe, 98,596. The Board of Finance updated that line to 148,596. They added $50,000, which means increased parties there. And then on page 222 are the expenses for this budget. Again, a pretty modest increase. The driver on this one, Burr Mansion expenses, and really that's fees and professional services, which are the 4th of July fireworks. Marine services went up. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on recreation? Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator, and Mark McDermott, District 9. And this probably isn't a budget question, but could you update us on the Roger Ludlow Middle School turf?
So it just got approved through engineering, finally. That was the last step we needed, and now it will go out to bid.
So what are your expectations for that? That project is how many years behind now?
It's about a full year, at least. My expectation would be that we are able to work with purchasing now and get a bid document put together within the next week, week and a half, put that out to bid, and I would think that we're likely starting construction probably right around the end of school, which would put us on pace for potentially a spring opening, potentially.
Okay, and baseball field or not? Or...
Yep. We were able to get the baseball field in there.
Good, excellent. Thank you.
Great news. Representative Walk.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Jay Walk, District 5, through you, Madam Moderator, to Anthony. So just to capitalize on what Representative McDermott just asked about turf, did Ward High School, was that in the plans also to put different turfing up there too?
It has been in the discussions. That's really a Board of Ed project. They run that facility itself. I'm not sure where they are in that process at the moment, though.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this line item? All right, last one for Anthony. Parks, page 227.
Okay, Parks, there's no revenue page here, so all the expenses. So page 228 are the expenses. In this budget here, again, we're pretty flat. We're carrying a 3% increase contracted through contracted property services. Again, that's a bid. And capital outlay is our other big line item where we have 2 trucks that were being replaced. Happy to answer any questions.
Representative Steele.
Thanks. Jeff Steele, District 3. Anthony, first of all, great job. Parks and Rec on keeping all the fields, the parks beautiful. Golf course, incredible condition already. Just amazing. But all the fields as well, they're in good shape. We've had a lot of rain. You guys do a great job, Parks and Rec, handling the fields. I understand Doug Novak may be retiring as superintendent of parks. Do you have any vacancies currently open in the department?
We do. We have a recreation coordinator position that's currently vacant. We have a laborer's position that's currently vacant within the Parks Department. And then Mr. Novak's position, the superintendent. He's currently there, but it will be vacant at the end of the month.
Have they, have the jobs been posted yet?
The recreation coordinator has been posted. That's internal right now. I believe it'll likely go external tomorrow or Wednesday. We are in discussions on when the other ones will be posted.
I see there's a salary decrease. I had it here a second ago. Hold on a second. For the Parks Commissioner, it's like 120 down to 100. Just curious about that. Is
Yep,
that
so-
like built-in savings that you're looking to achieve?
No,
or-
so what happened there was our park supervisor, longtime supervisor, Kevin Fox, retired in April. His replacement was hired internally, and started at a lower step. So, that's where that savings comes in.
Okay. And so, just like you said, filling the position is just going to take some time, or you're figuring that out. But nothing's been posted other than that first one you mentioned.
Correct. It has not been posted yet.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions regarding this item? Representative Barrett.
Anthony, excuse me, Steve Barrett, District 7. Anthony, just a little bit, there's a general supervisor of parks and a superintendent of parks.
Yep.
And how do those two jobs exist? And who does what, if you could just kind of illuminate that for me?
Yeah, of course. So the superintendent of parks oversees the entire parks division, including, but not limited to, the maintenance guys, the laborers that are on here, the guys that cut the fields. The superintendent is the one who's responsible for dealing with the contractors. So we have Greenway Property Services right now that mows a lot of our properties and takes care of our athletics fields. So he is the main contact with that, making sure their schedules are what they say they are and that they're actually doing that work. He deals with our other contractors, Aqualawn for irrigation repairs. And then he's also the contact person for every one of our construction projects that we do. So when we're doing the turf field at Ludlow Middle School, he is the boots on the ground, again, essentially the general contractor for the project, and he handles every one of our projects that way. The general park supervisor of parks is more of he gives the day-to-day tasks to the laborers, but he can also be on a machine as well and fill in where needed. Like this, it's more, I don't want to say it's a foreman position because it's not. It's more than a foreman, but he's the guy who does that type of work.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Representative McDermott.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. I'm sorry to go back, Anthony, on the Roger Ludlow Middle School turf that, just because you mentioned it again, what about the light situation there?
Lights are included.
Okay.
Thank you. Are there any other questions on this item? Okay, seeing none, we got to go back one. Oh, sorry, we have Representative Rock.
Are the lights, Anthony, in the scope of work in the bid?
They are, yes.
And they would have to be there, correct? If to vote on something like that, correct?
For the Ludlow Middle School turf project,
Correct.
this project was passed about 2 years ago. This went through Zoning Board of Appeals. It went through Town Planning and Zoning. It went through Conservation. It went through Engineering. It went through the RTM, the Board of Finance, the Board of Selectmen. So yeah.
I get it. I was just confirming all of that. Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you. I think that's it for Anthony. Any other questions? Thank you. We're not done yet. We do have to go back to the town clerk, so everyone don't get excited and leave. But we have our town clerk here, and she's offered to go last. So Betsy's here, page 40.
My budget decreased. That's it. That's it. Just one item of note, there's a new line for information technology, and all that did was just remove the cost that I pay for the records management system into the IT line. And the remainder of that is in the printing and binding line, which is basically the paper, all the archival supplies, absentee ballots, all the printing that comes out of my office.
Are there any questions for Ms. Brown? Seeing none, we next due up is our committee meeting, I believe, on the 22nd. We have our next budget meeting on the 20th. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Committee meetings on the 23rd. budget meetings on the 24th. Our second hearing, meetings adjourned. Thank you. If you have any questions from tonight's topic, send them my way.